Chapter 31. Passers-by on the street hurried along, seemingly all quite busy. Chen Lun walked among them with his hands in his pockets, appearing somewhat out of place. He had planned to go out and buy some things, and also to take a stroll around, to familiarize himself with the surrounding environment and see if he could gather some useful information. That's when he suddenly remembered, when he left his apartment, he had bumped into that gloomy young man in the corridor. At that time, the other party didn't seem to care about Chen Lun, their new neighbor. They passed by each other in silence, and the young man went straight into his own room. The sound of the door closing was a bit loud, revealing some annoyance. In that brief glance, Chen Lun saw anxiety and fear on the young man's face, presenting a worried look. But Chen Lun wasn't curious about his affairs, so he didn't take it to heart. It was just when passing by the flower shop that he casually inquired about it with Mrs. Caroline. Mrs. Caroline informed him that the young man's name was Kent, who seemed to be a middle-class youth who had come to Amber City to study. "Excuse me, sir, I need to get past." A man's voice came through. Chen Lun looked up and saw a group of people wearing short, blue capes. He stepped aside to make way. One of them held a long pole with a fiery tip, while another tacitly opened the cover of the street lamp, allowing their comrade to light the wick inside. As the street lamps were lit, they continued on to the next one. Their lamplighters. Only then did Chen Lun realize that it had gotten dark. He had wandered the vicinity for over half an hour without any result. However, the way he had been looking around nervously throughout his walk seemed to attract the attention of the patrol guards. Luckily, seeing that his dress did not resemble a hoodlum, plus the points he got for his good looks, they let go of their suspicion. However, this also served as a reminder to Chen Lun that he needed to get a proper identity for himself and Floey soon. Otherwise, getting caught would be troublesome. Just as he was about to turn back and stop by the general store to pick up some household supplies, he suddenly furrowed his brow. Chen Lun silently quickened his pace back. When passing a narrow alley, he suddenly turned and walked in. Soon after, 4 youths wearing leather caps and rough hemp dusters with cinched waists appeared at the entrance of the alley. "He went in here. Could he have seen us? Is he trying to run? No worries, this is a dead-end alley, he can't escape. Chase him." The few youths exchanged a few words and dashed in. By then it was completely dark, and the cramped alley was pitch black, one couldn't see one's own hand in front of them. The 4 of them almost tripped over a garbage can as they ran in and cursed under their breaths before they had to slow down. "Damn it, where did that kid go? How could he see in the dark like this?" Bang! A muffled sound, followed by the noise of someone falling to the ground. "What was that sound? Did you guys hear that?" Bang! Another sound similar to the first one rang out. The remaining 2 felt chills go down their spines. "Hey, guys, what do you say we get out of here first?" "Mike, I just felt something beside me." Bang! The man spoke halfway and then there was silence. The last one left, Mike, trembled as he stepped back. Boom, Erno, are you guys still there? Hey! Answer me! Stop messing around, damn it!" Suddenly, he saw a pair of emerald green vertical pupils light up in the darkness in front of him. His heart skipped a beat, urban legends he had heard flashed through his mind, and he felt a shiver, his heart stopping for a moment. The next second, however, he heard a deep, icy voice from the darkness. "Answer me, who are you? Why are you following me?" Mike was about to spout some nonsense when a faint blue glow flickered across his field of vision, and without realizing it, he found himself blurting out the truth. "My name is Mike, and these are my companions." 5 minutes later, Chen Lun walked out of the alley as if nothing had happened, heading towards number 7 Denton Street with a resigned expression on his face. Through hypnosis, he had already gleaned information about that group of people. They were just 4 low-level thugs who, seeing him alone and well-dressed like someone with money, had decided to try their hand at extortion. It was that simple, no complex schemes, no mastermind behind the scenes. He had thought he might stumble upon some big fish, but it had been a false alarm. However, he had not killed them. After all, he was new in town and didn't want to cause too much of a commotion over a trivial matter. The guy he had hypnotized would wake up remembering nothing. "I need to remind Floey when I get back, the security around here is terrible," Chen Lun thought to himself. The area did have patrol guards, but their work attitude could not compare to even a tenth of that in the inner city district. As he was 1 block away from the flower shop, he suddenly heard a faint scream. Through the light of a nearby lamp post, Chen Lun saw a figure being beaten at the corner of the wall. Are you sure this place isn't called Gotham City? The thought flickered through his mind. How come just wandering around today, he had encountered this kind of thing twice? Remember, kid, if you don't pay up by tomorrow, your body will end up in the sewers of the cesspool. Cough, cough. Stop hitting me, I'll pay you back tomorrow. As Chen Lun approached, he suddenly realized that the man being beaten looked familiar. Upon closer inspection, it was the neighbor he had met when leaving the house, a young man named Kent. His appearance was pitiful, kneeling on the ground with a blue and swollen face, begging 2 men in leather jackets and tight pants. "Ha, we actually know you don't have the money. How about this, we'll give you a bit of advice. Just introduce the girl living in your building to the Bird and Flower pub, and you can hold off on paying the money for now, how does that sound?" The man said with a sinister tone. "You mean Connie?" Cough. "I'm not close to her." "Not close? You're fooling nobody." With that, the 2 men started pummeling Kent all over again. It wasn't until Kent's screams turned hoarse, and he began to beg incessantly, that the 2 men stopped. I indeed used to be her classmate, but I dropped out after just 2 months of classes," Kent said in a strained breath, struggling to speak. Seeing that the 2 men were about to hit him again, Kent hurriedly said. "But I know where she works, I know the boss there. I can get her fired first, and then force her into your territory." After saying this, Kent seemed to resign himself, took a long breath and leaned against the wall to rest. "Good, then we'll wait for your news. Remember not to drag it out too long, or you'll regret it." The 2 men threatened before turning around and leaving. Chen Lun seemed to overhear something and had not planned to get involved, but because they were neighbors, he decided to ask about the situation. "Hey, do you need some help?" Chen Lun spoke as gently as he could. To his surprise, Kent glared at him fiercely, looked down sullenly, and continued to mutter to himself. Chen Lun shrugged silently, it appeared he was not needed. Then came the sound of footsteps in the street. Chen Lun looked up to see a young girl passing by who happened to look in his direction. She had a delicate and attractive face, but at the moment, she was looking at Chen Lun with disdain before quickly moving on. Chen Lun was puzzled. Why would she look at me like that? He turned to look at Kent, who now resembled a beaten pig, and suddenly understood something. "Don't tell me I've been mistaken for one of the extortionist thugs? Am I the clown here?" Chapter 32. The Sewage Slum. This area is the edge of the city's waste discharge, close to a huge sewage channel. To call it a channel is an understatement, it's more like a spacious moat for the city. Enormous drainage pipes, like train tunnels, are lined up beneath the embankment, tirelessly discharging the city's sewage night and day. This wastewater follows the channel out of the city, merging into rivers, and ultimately reaching the Eastern Ocean. But because of the inefficient discharge, the sewage slum constantly accumulates a vast amount of wastewater, causing the district to be filled with a foul stench, hence the Amber City residents dub it the Stench District. Though despised, the sewage slum attracts countless lower-class residents who flock here to live. For those who don't wish to hustle in and out of the city every day, or who take pride in staying in the city long-term, the sewage slum is simply the best choice. Of course, being a hotspot for crime due to the mixture of people and poverty, even patrol guards and police officers refuse to set foot here, leaving it in a state of near anarchic self-determination. It is also the shadow beneath the great city. The only tavern in the sewage slum, the Flower and Bird Tavern. This is one of the few places where the residents of the sewage slum can find entertainment, and because it's cheap. For just 1 copper crow, you can join the fun, whether it's to gaze at scantily clad maids or to cheer on brawls and fights. Currently, the tavern is packed with patrons, noisy and muggy, with maids weaving through the crowd with their trays. A man dressed in a short leather jacket and striped tight pants pushed the door open and walked in. "Hey, Lenny!" The heavily made-up landlady greeted him warmly as she saw him. "I've got some things to take care of, I'll come find you to play after I'm done." He smirked as he groped her, then made a beeline for the interior. The patrons quickly got out of his way upon seeing him. An inattentive fool bumped into him, about to curse out loud. When he saw who it was, he immediately stepped back and bowed apologetically. Fortunately, the man didn't want to waste time and merely gave him a cold glance before walking away. The drunken bumbler broke out in a cold sweat. This was a member of the Iron Fist gang, offending him would definitely lead to suffering. The Flower and Bird Tavern was Iron Fist gang territory, and playing here required sharp eyes or nobody would know if their own body might be floating in the sewage channels tomorrow. The man in the leather jacket passed through the kitchen to reach the courtyard out back, which had a large open space with wooden posts and targets set up. These targets were dressed in ragged clothes and straw hats as if to simulate human figures. A tall building and 2 warehouses enclosed the area behind the open space. He briskly walked into the building, where dozens of gang members, all wearing leather jackets and tight pants like him, gathered. On an extended couch at the farthest end sat a broad-shouldered, bear-like man. He was dressed in a suit and shiny shoes, combing back his hair neatly, and smoking a cigarette. "Boss Gary, I've got it all figured out." The man in the leather jacket bowed respectfully. "Talk." The sturdy man exhaled a puff of smoke, uncomfortably loosening a button on his waistcoat. "That kid came here by horse carriage, an outsider with a very pretty girl, seems to be his sister. They are both well dressed, but they only moved into number 7 on Denton Street." "Well done." Gary praised him, drawing the last puff before crushing the cigarette in the ashtray. "So it seems they're probably young folks who've come to the big city to seek out relatives or for education." He seemed to remember something and became noticeably restless. People like them, with no status or background, are the perfect targets to strike at. Find an opportunity to kill the boy and snatch the girl. But be discreet, don't cause too much of a scene. It may be chaotic in the outer city district, but Iron Fist gang doesn't call all the shots. "Understood, boss." The man in the leather jacket acknowledged and then gestured to several card-playing brothers as they left the building. Gary slowly leaned back on the couch, exhaling deeply. "Hopefully, this will buy us some more time from Lord Fedman." Click, click, click. Clack. Fingers stuffed a row of lead bullets into the chamber and slid the cover shut. Chen Lun looked at the 4 flintlock guns and 2 pairs of iron gloves on the table with satisfaction. "It's a pity that there isn't much ammunition left. Those investigators didn't think to bring more, always scrimping and scraping, so disgraceful." Chen Lun's face showed his displeasure. Pity their misfortune, angry at their lack of spirit. This was out of concern for their lives, definitely not because he hadn't scrounged enough bullets to complain about. "Here, take this gun for self-defense." Chen Lun handed a flintlock gun to Floey. Floey took it and caressed the engravings, revealing a slight smile. "Thank you." Chen Lun packed up the weapons on the table and stood up, glancing at the clock on the wall. It was exactly 9:20 in the morning. "Let's go, it's time for a meal." "Are we dining with Mrs. Caroline on the 2nd floor?" Chen Lun nodded in surprise. "Of course, we've paid for it." Although he knew that 1 silver ducat for meals was definitely not enough, Caroline's generous food and warmth couldn't be bought with money. But Chen Lun had taken note of this kindness. If any short-sighted fool dared to cause trouble at the flower shop, he would certainly carve a flower in their arsehole. If possible, it would be better if the troublemakers knew where Dolly was. Even better if it was Dolly himself causing the trouble. And maybe inform them of Viscount Pompey's residence, too. Getting something for nothing is always delightful. Chen Lun's eyebrows twitched, and he couldn't help but look forward to the arrival of such troublemakers. As he and Floey left the room and descended to the 3rd floor, they suddenly heard a bout of quarreling. "I won't go. How many times must I say it? The medicine from the Red Apple Church is definitely problematic, why won't you listen?" "Dad!" a girl's angry voice shouted. Followed by the sound of a door slamming shut. Chen Lun then saw the chestnut-haired girl from last night come storming into the corridor, apparently preparing to go downstairs. Her features were not stunning, even flawed with some freckles, but they were pleasant to look at. At this moment, Connie's face still bore some tear stains, and she seemed surprised to see 2 peers in the corridor. Then, noticing Chen Lun, she seemed to remember the scene from last night, frowned, and turned to leave. Chen Lun felt helpless and couldn't be bothered to explain. He proceeded with Floey to the 2nd floor and ran into Mrs. Caroline just in time. "Oh, little Jack and the beautiful little Floey. Come on in, I was just about to come up and call you too." "Thank you for your trouble, Mrs. Caroline." Following her inside, Caroline had already laid out the prepared breakfast on the dining table. Mrs. Caroline's room layout was the same as the other tenants, but her decorating made it look more elegant and luxurious. And with a touch of girlishness. The room was dotted with vases of neatly trimmed flowers everywhere, and one could smell a fresh fragrance as they walked in. "Eat up, this is a rice dish with fish and eggs I carefully prepared. I believe you'll like it." Caroline walked to the dining table and lifted the cover off the dishes. A rich scent of cream assailed their senses, and Chen Lun's appetite was greatly piqued. Chapter 33. He was silently moved to tears and expressed great satisfaction. Mrs. Caroline's cooking was stunning. The aromatic rice was stir-fried in butter with eggs, and topped with chopped celery, cod, and shrimp, all very fresh and tender. Although Chen Lun wasn't a fan of fish, he ate everything up and then contentedly drank a cup of floral tea. "Is that your husband, Mrs. Caroline?" He noticed 2 picture frames on the cupboard and couldn't help but ask. Turning around, Mrs. Caroline looked back, smiled, and responded. "Oh yes, that's my husband, Henry, and our son, Oliver." "Then, are they also in Amber City now?" Chen Lun asked aloud. Mrs. Caroline fell silent for a moment. "No, Henry sacrificed himself for the Empire many years ago, and so did Oliver." Mrs. Caroline stood up, picked up the photo album, and wiped the dust off it with a handkerchief. The photographs showed a young Mrs. Caroline and Mr. Henry in military uniform, and another one of their son, Oliver. They bravely gave their lives in an overseas landing operation. May the sun's radiance shine on them forever. Mrs. Caroline said a prayer quietly, then put the photo album down. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Caroline," Chen Lun said apologetically. Floey glanced at him, and through her black silk scarf, her look seemed to carry a slight reproach. "It's okay, little Jack, it's all in the past." Mrs. Caroline's smile returned, and she came over to refill Chen Lun's floral tea. "Flowers bloom like fire, as does loneliness. Time may make us forget, but as long as I remember them, that's enough." Chen Lun looked at this white-haired woman, unsure of what to say. Mrs. Caroline had spoken of a battle, of which he had heard. The Tresor Empire had long coveted lands beyond the mainland. The nearest huge island to the Tresor Empire was beyond the Far East. This island was known as Mist Island, inhabited by people and civilization alike. The overseas landing operations launched by the Tresor Empire were essentially colonial wars. Yet for many years, all had ended in failure. Even until several versions later in a previous life, the Empire's plan to colonize had still made no progress. What unknown, powerful force resided on Mist Island, able to repel the Empire's incursions? "Mrs. Caroline, your cooking is wonderful. May I learn from you?" Floey put down her spoon, looked up, and asked with a smile. Mrs. Caroline, surprised and then delighted, sat down next to her. "Of course, little Floey." Chen Lun was also surprised by Floey's question. But he guessed her intention was likely to divert Mrs. Caroline's sorrowful emotions. "Indeed a good girl. Remember to cook the cod in milk beforehand, and do not break it into pieces." Listening to Mrs. Caroline excitedly discuss the nuances of making fish and rice casserole, Chen Lun gave Floey a thumbs up. Floey responded with a faint smile. Afterward, Chen Lun expressed his gratitude for the hospitality to Mrs. Caroline and then left. Walking out of the building, he planned to start his day's routine. Passing by a coffee shop next to the flower store, he noticed Connie and Kent sitting under an outdoor parasol. Kent was talking animatedly, gesticulating wildly, but Connie was unmoved. She sat with her arms crossed, somewhat lost in thought. Chen Lun didn't bother with them, nor did he care, and chose to leave directly. In the alley across the street, 2 young men from the Iron Fist gang listlessly smoked. "Hey, buddy, why not just go in and nab that foreign girl? You must be crazy. This street is under the special care of Viscount Pompey in the inner city district, especially that flower shop. I heard the landlady, Mrs. Caroline, is the widow of a war comrade of Viscount Pompey. If you're looking for trouble, don't drag me into it." The young man who proposed the capture was startled. "How did you know about this?" "Don't forget, the boss often goes out to drink with the big shots from the inner city district. I overheard a subordinate officer mention it last time." The young man discarded his cigarette butt and tugged at his leather jacket. Another guy, however, was somewhat impatient. "So what do we do now? That out-of-towner girl hides in there all day. It's the guy who comes out to stroll around, why not tie him up first, then make him bring out the girl?" The one who had thrown the cigarette butt helplessly took off his felt trilby, scratching his head. He looked at his companion as if staring at an idiot. "You could try that, but if he calls the police, by the next day, we'll definitely be in the drains. All right, let's wait a bit more. Chen Lun bought a newspaper and sat down on a bench in the square. On a temporarily constructed wooden platform nearby, a monk from the Red Apple Church still stood today, tirelessly preaching. Ah, magnificent Lady Rose, thank you for bestowing upon us health and vigor, passion and fervor. Your compassionate gaze showers upon humanity, casting seeds in the garden that grow into trees. The holy insects consume the apple, their secretions turn into nectar, showing mercy to the ailments and the suffering of mankind, easing their pains and misfortunes. The monk descended from the platform with a face full of pity for the world. Two church guardians, whose origins were unknown, each held a tray with several small boxes on them. Many excited observers rushed forward, eagerly purchasing those small boxes. Praise Rose. The monk lightly touched his left chest and forehead with his forefinger, spread his fingers wide, and made a prayer gesture as if holding up the sky. Chen Lun watched the red-robed monk and could not help but snort in ridicule. Oh Red, you're deceiving people again, eh? Why not take a break and do some sacrifices or something? Chen Lun was well aware of what was inside those small boxes. It was a secretion from a supernatural creature known as nectar, which had healing and health-enhancing effects on the human body. The side effects were not significant, just morally wrong. Because it reduced lifespan and had a slight addictive quality. Small, supernatural maggots excreted these secretions after consuming the apples, creating the nectar. Chen Lun felt disgusted just thinking about it. But these common people did not know this and were instead willing to give huge donations in exchange for this miraculous medicine. He sighed lightly, the Red Apple Church was indeed very good at this. Hey, do you think the tax cut proposal by Viscount Daniel will pass? How likely is that? It's totally impractical. Two office workers were chatting on a nearby bench, catching Chen Lun's attention. He felt that something sounded familiar, so he flipped over his newspaper. Sure enough, he saw a slightly overweight middle-aged man holding forth in a large section, the very Viscount Daniel who had been the subject of much discussion lately. Sigh, Viscount Daniel is a kind and upright good person, it's just unfortunate that the council never considers such views. A good person? I doubt it. His proposals are clearly impractical and doomed to fail. Mostly they're just published to attract attention and gain votes. I heard he's planning to run for a seat in Fossil City. The tone of the speaking office worker was somewhat disdainful, indicating he wasn't quite fond of the legislator. His companion seemed slightly annoyed. How can you regard Viscount Daniel like that? He's one of the few in Amber City who truly considers the common people. Oh please. With this proposal, for example, Amber City's finances simply can't support the operations of the city after such a tax cut. If that happens, there won't even be a lamplighter to light the street lamps at night. Just don't fall into a ditch when you go out. The two office workers started arguing, but Chen Lun wasn't paying close attention. Because he suddenly remembered something, the Viscount Daniel was, indeed, the very person the small guild had protected in his past life. And it was the same Viscount who would end up being killed by Dolly. Chapter 34. Perhaps the next resident to rest here could catch up on the recent major events in Amber City for free. He glanced at the sky and slowly made his way to number 7 Denton Street where the flower shop was located. On his walk, he continued to ponder the connection between Councillor Daniel and Dolly, hoping to find some trace of Dolly's current whereabouts through this thread. But after all, Dolly's attempt to assassinate the councillor wouldn't occur for 2 more years, and current clues were too scarce to make any deductions. Chen Lun sighed to himself. It had already been 2 days since he arrived in Amber City, and he still hadn't made any substantial progress. Time is of the essence. If that doesn't work, I'll have to take a risk and probe into the inner city district. The inner city district had ample security forces, backed by the shelter and various churches. The strength of Amber City's official transcendence was not something a small place like Emerald Town could compare with. Unless absolutely necessary, Chen Lun did not want to take such risks with his own safety. Returning to number 7 Denton Street, he went straight upstairs to his home. When he opened the door, he was taken aback for a moment. In the living room, he saw Floey chatting with a visitor. And the visitor was none other than Connie, who lived downstairs. You're back. Floey's ethereal voice said with a hint of joy in her tone. This is... Chen Lun poured himself a glass of water and looked at Connie with curiosity. With her lips pursed, the girl looked up at him with some struggle, took a deep breath, and said. Mr. Jack, I... I think you must be in need of a maid. Miss Floey can't see with her eyes, and daily life must be inconvenient. I should be able to help. After an initial hesitant start, Connie spoke more fluently as she continued. And I can also clean, launder clothes, and keep the room tidy. I would only need 2 silver ducats a week, no, 1 silver ducat and 50 copper crow is enough. Having said that, Connie looked expectantly at Chen Lun. Chen Lun frowned slightly. He and Floey had too many secrets and did not want to come into close contact with ordinary people. Connie was constantly paying attention to the expression of the dark-haired young man. Seeing Chen Lun frown, her heart sank. Just as Chen Lun was about to decline, Floey spoke up. Connie has lost her job, and she doesn't want to trouble Mrs. Caroline too much, because Mrs. Caroline has helped her a lot. Upon hearing this, Chen Lun recalled the words said by Kent, who was beaten up the night before. Perhaps Connie's job loss had something to do with that fellow. He looked at Floey and thought that having someone to talk to her might not be a bad thing after all. He trusted that Floey, with her intelligence, would not casually reveal anything about the mystic realm. Aren't you still in class? Chen Lun sat down with his glass of water and asked as he drank. I get off class at 4 in the afternoon every day. I'll come here on time to clean, and on weekends, I can accompany Miss Floey for a walk. Connie said uneasily. All right then, you can take care of the cleaning. Let's make it a weekly salary of 2 silver ducats, is that all right? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Jack. Connie was visibly happy. She stood up, clutching her small hands, and then turned her gaze to Floey. Thank you too, Miss Floey. Floey responded with a smile. So should I come to work tonight, Mr. Jack? Ah, no need, you can come tomorrow night instead. Chen Lun sensed a lively change in the girl before him. She had seemed somewhat run down before. Although he did not want to dampen Connie's enthusiasm, he still needed to think about his next plan for the evening without interruptions. Okay, Mr. Jack. Connie curtsied to the man, who seemed younger than she was, and respectfully left the room. She carefully closed the door behind her as she exited. Turning around, Connie took a deep breath and revealed a radiant smile. At this moment, her heart was filled with immense joy. After losing her job, the world felt dark, but now, a ray of hope had appeared. Her family's finances were dwindling, she still needed to attend classes, and her father depended on timely doses of fruit nectar from the Red Apple Church to sustain his life. If she couldn't find work quickly, things would only get worse. She was filled with gratitude towards Mr. Jack, who had provided her with hope. She also slightly changed her initial impression of him, no longer simply seeing him as a bastard who enjoyed bullying others. The riverside slums. The Flower and Bird Tavern's courtyard. Gary, the boss of the Iron Fist gang, had just seen off a distinguished guest from the inner city district, the Fedman butler. His face was gloomy as he violently swung his hefty arm, throwing a punch forward. Bang! The straw hat spun off into the air, as a deep imprint was left on the wooden post in front of him. Damn it! Then he rushed forward, unleashing a ferocious barrage of punches at the post, seemingly venting his inner restlessness. Money! Bang! Craftsman! Smack! What's the use of hurrying me? I'm already looking for a solution. Gary roared, leaping up with a turning whip kick, the powerful strike cutting through the air and screeching loudly. Bang! The kick uprooted the post, sending it flying away with a whistling sound. Boss, we've captured the guy. A gang member in a leather jacket approached, speaking with reverence. Gary turned, maintaining a stern face, as 2 more men tactfully moved close. One cut and lit a cigar for him while another draped a felt coat over his shoulders. Then, 2 gang members brought in a battered and bruised young man, Kent, who was Chen Lun's neighbor, and forced him to kneel before Gary. The man trembled, not daring to look up. He had just witnessed the boss of the Iron Fist gang kick the post into the air and was terrified. I've already caused Connie to lose her job. Just give me a bit more time, and I swear I'll force her to come work here. His voice was filled with begging. But Gary just shook his head, as if he found Kent too slow or had little hope for the situation. Despair filled Kent's heart. He could almost see Gary waving his hand in the next second, and then imagine himself being dragged away to be cruelly killed and thrown into the drainage ditch. Perhaps it was a burst of desperate instinct to survive that sparked an idea in Kent's mind. Boss Gary. In the building where I live, 2 outsiders have recently arrived, and they look very rich, One of them is a very beautiful girl, and she's blind. I can figure out a way to help you capture her. Gary stopped smoking his cigar and stared at him, pondering in silence. As Kent anxiously awaited a response, Gary finally spoke. What's your plan? Joy sparked in Kent's heart. After a moment's thought, he shared his plan. Chapter 35. Evening. Chen Lun once again finished his day's patrol, returning to number 7 Denton Street full of guilt. When he opened the door, however, he didn't see Floey's figure. Hey? Where is she? He looked around the room but still couldn't find her. Chen Lun walked out of the room, puzzled, ready to ask Mrs. Caroline. Just then, he happened to meet Kent coming upstairs. The scene was just like their first meeting 2 days ago. Only this time, Kent's face had less gloom and more hurt. As he looked up and saw Chen Lun, Kent quickly averted his gaze and tried to pass by with his head down. I know everything. As they brushed past one another, Chen Lun suddenly spoke. Startled, Kent nearly tumbled down the stairs. His heartbeat quickened, and he tried hard to control his emotions, maintaining an appearance as normal as possible. No, what exactly? Kent turned back, a look of confusion on his face. Your name, of course, Mr. Kent. Chen Lun answered as if it were a matter of fact. Or what else could it be? Kent breathed a sigh of relief, but immediately, an inexplicable irritation arose. He frowned and snorted coldly, no longer paying any attention to Chen Lun, and walked straight into his room. Just as he was about to close the door, a hand stopped it at the threshold. Wait a moment, Mr. Kent. Kent looked up and saw the black-haired young man with a polite smile, looking straight at him. What else do you want? He was impatient, wanting to get rid of the annoyance as soon as possible. He still had lots of unpacking to do, and the Iron Fist gang members were waiting for him outside. Have you seen my sister? The Miss Floey who lives next door. Sorry, I haven't seen her. Kent's voice was harsh, his indifference palpable. Chen Lun was somewhat surprised, slightly furrowing his brows. That's odd, what about Miss Connie? Have you seen her? She's currently part-time maid at our place, and according to her, she should have finished classes by now and would be here to look after my sister Floey. Upon hearing this, Kent's impatience instantly transformed into anger. The mere mention set him off. In fact, he had already learned about this from Connie. At the time, he had wondered why his smooth talking couldn't persuade Connie to go to Silver Ducats, concluding that it was this guy's interference. Damn it! All my efforts gone to waste. Everything was messed up by this foreign bastard. I haven't seen anyone. I haven't seen anybody. Kent struggled to control his expression, speaking in a cold voice. Is that all? Sir? Now would you please move your hand from the door? Otherwise, don't blame me if it gets crushed. Oh, sorry. Chen Lun withdrew his hand, looking embarrassed. Really sorry to disturb you, Mr. Kent. With that, Chen Lun turned and left. Kent watched the black-haired youths disappearing back, his facial expression growing more and more fierce. The Iron Fist gang should have dealt with those two girls by now. Next up is you, you son of a bitch. I'll watch as they throw you into the sewer. You'll choke to death on sewage, you bastard. Cough, cough. Connie's face turned red as she coughed twice. So sour. She held a cold drink in her hand, walking along the street with Floey. It was nightfall, and the black street lamps on the side of the road lit up, one after another. Miss Floey, how does your gold pounds Earl taste? Connie curiously looked at the sealed paper cup Floey was holding. It's delicious. Floey maintained a smile. She turned her head slightly towards Connie and offered the milk tea enhanced with cream. Do you want to try it? No, thank you, Miss Floey. Connie was startled and quickly waved her hand. She was simply curious why Miss Floey would enjoy milk tea without a hint of sugar. She herself was silly for having chosen a fruit tea that was too sour and couldn't bear to throw it away. Because she was strapped for cash, Connie seldom afforded herself the luxury of consuming at a coffee shop. This time, it was Miss Floey who had paid for the outing, and Connie was witnessing for the first time someone carrying a bag containing dozens of gold pounds, proceeding straight to a coffee shop to buy a drink. When Miss Floey opened her purse, Connie could only see the glow of gold before her eyes. Oh my, she was so wealthy. Miss Floey must be of noble lineage. At that moment, Connie was extremely surprised and secretly guessed in her heart. Then she nervously scrutinized every customer in the coffee shop, as if worrying someone would notice the money and harbor ill intentions. Fortunately, there were few customers in the coffee shop at the time, and they did not pay much attention to them. However, Connie still softly reminded Miss Floey, asking her to not bring so much money the next time. The outer city district was not very peaceful, and it would be unfortunate to encounter a robber. Miss Floey was surprised upon hearing her words, not having realized that what was in the purse were gold pounds. As Connie had thought, it was indeed the case. The money was given to Floey in advance by Chen Lun, and Floey simply assumed it was just a bag of silver ducats. Mr. Jack is too kind to Miss Floey. Connie truly envied her. But that gave way to a sense of inferiority. Perhaps only a girl as angelic as Miss Floey could be treated this way. She felt somewhat disheartened. But why would Mr. Jack bring Miss Floey to live on Denton Street? Many questions arose in her heart, yet Connie did not dare to ask aloud, as that would be rude. She held Miss Floey's hand and strolled by the street. Turning her head to see the black silk ribbon covering Floey's eyes, Connie felt somewhat sad for her. She is such a sentimental and kind-hearted girl. Floey looked ahead, her face maintaining a smile. Her strong perception allowed her to see Connie's expression and emotions clearly. Then, Connie pulled out 2 blue tickets from her pocket and said to Floey, "Tomorrow is the weekend, and I originally planned to take you for a walk in the park. But since Kent has 2 tickets for tonight's Dolphin Opera House, let's go see an opera instead." After speaking, she realized something and hurriedly added, "Actually, the seats in the opera house are all too far from the stage to see clearly, but the sound is loud, you can hear it." Perhaps feeling that her explanation was weak, Connie looked dejected. On her way back from class today, Kent had stopped her, wanting to invite her to the opera house tonight. Connie turned down Kent, indicating that she had to work a part-time job cleaning and take care of Miss Floey in the evening. Kent walked away sadly, but he left the 2 tickets with her. She had initially planned to decline, but then she thought of Miss Floey, thinking they might enjoy going together. Tickets to the Dolphin Opera House weren't cheap, costing 3 silver ducats each, and Connie usually wouldn't indulge in watching a play. If they didn't go, wouldn't that be a waste? After hearing what she said, Floey paused. An opera. This was something completely new to her as well. Immediately, her face broke into a smile. "Okay, let's go to the opera, I'm looking forward to it." Chapter 36. If one took the main road, it would be a longer detour. Connie, who was familiar with the area, knew a shortcut that only took about 15 minutes to walk. When Floey heard that the shortcut wouldn't take long, she suggested they walk. The 2 of them, one in front of the other and holding hands, slowly made their way to a secluded alley. Passing through here and turning a corner, they could see the Dolphin Opera House. The shops on this street were all old ones selling second-hand items and clocks, and most were closed at this time. The few that still had lights on showed no signs of life. Connie, who had previously worked nights, was used to this and wasn't scared. She even comforted Miss Floey beside her, telling her not to worry. "Kent did a good job," she said. But just then, Connie suddenly heard a deep male voice in front of her. Looking up, she immediately felt chills run down her spine. More than 10 men had surrounded them. "Grab them! And be quick about it!" At the command of their leader, the rest of the men rushed forward with fierce smiles. Connie's heart raced, and a wave of fear and dread overwhelmed her. "Miss Floey, run!" She grabbed Floey's hand, trying to turn and escape. But before they had taken more than a few steps, those menacing men in leather jackets blocked their way, reaching out to grab them. "Got you, Bikey!" The man's hand firmly grasped Connie's arm. Crack! Kent had just shut the door when he suddenly heard an odd noise. He carefully observed and realized something was stuck in the door. Glancing up along the door gap, what met his eyes was a pitch-black gun barrel. Kent's heart skipped a beat, feeling as though his soul was about to leap out of his body. Looking up further, he saw the black-haired young man who should have already gone downstairs, staring emotionless at him. "I'll ask you once more, did you really not see them?" The flintlock gun was pressed against Kent's forehead, the cold touch making him shiver. "No. I didn't," he stammered. Cold sweat streamed down his face, but Kent dared not wipe it away. A hint of disappointment crossed the black-haired young man's face. "Since that's the case, you're of no use to me, time to die." His finger lay on the trigger, ready to pull. Thump! Kent suddenly dropped to his knees. Don't. Don't kill me. I know everything, I know it all. He collapsed in a moment, crying out in agony. Kent was truly scared, he feared being shot by the other party at any second. The man before him seemed like a lunatic, unpredictable and mercurial. This fear was far more intense than any threat from the Iron Fist gang. Chen Lun pushed the door open and then slowly closed it behind him. He held a gun in his hand, pointing it at Kent, and casually sat down on a chair. Tell me everything you know, he commanded. The seashell necklace on Chen Lun's chest emitted a faint blue light. Kent's eyes went blank, and he began to speak involuntarily. It was the Iron Fist gang leader, Gary, who told me. 10 minutes later. Having heard Kent's story, Chen Lun understood the causes and circumstances, as well as the despicable tricks of the Iron Fist gang. From the moment he had met Kent in the stairwell, he had noticed something was off about him. After a brief exchange, he sensed that everything about the man, from his heartbeat, breathing, facial expressions, sweat secretion, to even his blood flow, indicated that Kent was hiding something. A regular person could not deceive Chen Lun, a transcendent. What? What have you done to me? As Kent came to his senses, not understanding what had happened, he was suddenly filled with terror and confusion. He didn't have time to think much, and what seemed to lay before him now was a dead end. Please don't kill me. The Iron Fist gang forced me. They scammed all my money and then demanded it back. If I didn't pay, they threatened to kill me. I had no choice but to work for them. I'm sorry. I repent. Please spare me. Kent pleaded. But seeing Chen Lun indifferent, he seemed to think of something else. He then began trembling as he got to his feet and started frantically searching the room. Chen Lun raised an eyebrow but didn't stop him. What did he want to do? Chen Lun was curious. Soon, Kent, with a look of joy, came up to Chen Lun holding an old book. He handed it over like presenting a treasure. This is a treasured heirloom of our family, my grandfather gave it to me when I left. He said it was very valuable and definitely worth a lot of money. Chen Lun, however, didn't even give it a glance and simply scoffed. If it's so valuable and expensive, why didn't you sell it to pay off your debt? Or give it directly to the Iron Fist gang? Kent's smile stiffened. He felt the last sliver of hope in his heart shatter completely. He was not lying, this book was indeed a treasured possession of his family. His grandfather had repeatedly told him to look through it often, saying it would be of great help to him and might even lead their family to prosperity in the future. But he had never seen anything special in it, considering it merely a sentimental old book. Chen Lun casually took the book, glanced at it. Recorder Ken Burney's memoirs. His eyes slightly narrowed, a possibility flashed through his mind. Kent suddenly noticed that the flintlock gun he had pointed at himself had been put down by the dark-haired young man. He couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Whew! The cool breeze blew through the quiet street, carrying a pungent scent of blood. Connie stood frozen, unbelievingly staring at the scene before her. The man who had been holding her arm just a moment ago now lay in a pool of blood, with a gaping hole in his chest, slowly oozing blood. Turning her head, she saw Floey holding a flintlock gun, its barrel still smoking, which had appeared out of nowhere. Sieti! That bitch has a firearm. Don't be afraid, she has already shot Lenny dead, she's out of bullets. The other men, after their initial shock, had regained their composure. After a brief exchange, they charged again. Bang! Bang! 2 more gunshots rang out. The first 2 men who rushed forward fell under Floey's flintlock gun. What? The members of the Iron Fist gang stopped in their tracks. They never expected that the 2 women they thought would be easy targets were so tough to handle. Especially the beautiful blind girl, who had pulled out a flintlock gun capable of multiple shots. It's unheard of. How could there be a flintlock gun that can fire multiple shots? Everybody, put on your mad hands. At that moment, one of the men shouted. In a flurry of delicate metallic friction sounds, the remaining gang members from the Iron Fist gang put on iron gloves. Bikey, don't think you're the only one with a firearm. They then each pulled out a strangely shaped firearm, short in body and flared at the muzzle like a trumpet. Then they aimed their firearms at the 2 women. Miss Floey, what should we do? With so many firearms pointed at them, Connie felt her heart jump to her throat. Her mind was blank, not even wondering how Miss Floey could accurately shoot and kill 3 men, being blind. Floey couldn't help but frown slightly. She wasn't afraid of dying, but she worried about Connie suffering the same fate. All right, don't hurt Connie, I'll go with you. Chapter 37. Under Nightfall. Denton Street, number 7. Kent burst out of the pitch-dark corridor like a madman. Across the street in the alley, 2 members of the Iron Fist gang who had been waiting spotted him, and couldn't help but frown. What's this kid doing? Made us wait so long for nothing. Hey, something seems off, he looks panicked. Kent dove into the alley, and upon seeing the 2 young men in leather jackets, he saw them as saviors. His face lit up with joy. Let's go. Hurry, take me with you. He immediately lunged into the arms of one of them. The 2 Iron Fist gang members exchanged a glance, seeing the confusion in each other's eyes. Damn it, get off me, hey! The leather-jacketed man who got a full embrace from Kent was somewhat disgruntled. A grown man like himself shouldn't be hugged like this by another man. He didn't want to be misunderstood by his brothers in the gang and attract countless fencing enthusiasts. Leave, take me out of here. A faint voice came from his embrace. Kent's mind flashed back to the last scene before he fled through the door. Those indifferent eyes of the dark-haired young man, his regretful expression, and his flat voice. You shouldn't have touched my people, Mr. Kent. The other party extended 2 fingers and lightly stroked his neck. The cold touch made his body tingle. A sudden pain followed, and Kent was puzzled. But fear surged, driving him to run out. At this moment, the 2 Iron Fist gang men quickly flipped Kent over. Seeing his condition, they both jumped in fright. Kent's face was congested with blood, veins protruding, eyes bulging and filled with blood vessels, his expression terrified. One of them crouched down, placed a hand on his chest, and bent down to listen for breathing, but there was none. Damn it! He's dead! The man cursed. He had just run over, full of life, and looked more than capable of competing in a sprint race. But how could he just, like that? Look at his neck. What is that? Reminded by the other, the leather-jacketed man turned to look and saw 2 dark holes on Kent's neck. They looked like wounds, but there was no bleeding. Urban legends he'd heard of flashed in his mind, and it was easy for him to associate them with some monster. Could it be vampires? Bullshit, it's clearly snake bites. He was poisoned to death. The 2 guys exchanged a few words in a low voice and then fell silent, both feeling incredulous. He was supposed to go home and pack his bags, how did he suddenly get bitten by a venomous snake? Then they heard slow but clear footsteps. Looking up, they saw a man walking towards them with the light behind him. Hey! Get lost! Did you hear me? The 2 Iron Fist gang members laid down Kent's body and stood up to shout at the stranger. Suddenly, the figure of the man vanished before their eyes. They were stunned for a moment. Then both felt fingers lightly brushing their necks. After a cold sensation came a slight sting. When they turned their heads, the stranger had already walked far down the street, leaving only his back in sight. Damn it, you! Ugh! 2 thuds. The 2 Iron Fist gang members fell to the ground, their eyes wide open. Their death unable to be said similar to Kent's, it was exactly the same. Snake's kiss marks appeared on their necks just like those on Kent's. Killed ordinary members of the Iron Fist gang, gained 20 experience points too. Triggered C-Class Task, King of the Sewage Beach. Task Description: the Iron Fist gang from the outer city district of Amber City has bared their claws at you, will you respond with sharpened fangs? Kill them. Destroy them. Or enslave them. Show them who the King of the Sewage Beach is. Task Reward: 1000 experience points, 1 gold pound, and Mad Hand Prototype Diagram Palm Fireworks 1. Accepted. Chen Lun walked forward indifferently, heading towards the Dolphin Opera House. Animal Mimicry of Max. Snake's Kiss. Skill Description: you have learned to imitate the bite of a venomous snake and inject toxins, and the trait is not limited to your teeth. He didn't choose to shoot rashly. Such a loud noise would easily draw unwanted trouble. Previously, there hadn't been much use for this animal trait, but now it was quite suitable. Chen Lun's chilly whisper faintly echoed through the streets. Iron Fist Gang. Welcome to Sewage Beach, you 2 lovely ladies. The entrance to Sewage Beach at night. A group of Iron Fist Gang members surrounded Connie and Floey, intending to take them to the Floral Tavern. At the edge of some steps, there was a rusty iron plate covered in filth, marked with the word Sewage Beach. One only needed to walk down the broad staircase to reach the area of sewage beach. Not even the lamplighter would come here to light the street lamps, so it was pitch dark all around. Move it, Gary, the boss must still be waiting for our good news. One of the men urged, admiring the flintlock gun he had snatched from Floey's hands. What a fantastic gun! It's so much better than our raging fire. Definitely need to show it to the boss, and then have those craftsmen really learn. At that moment, Connie suddenly cursed. Get lost! Don't touch me! She defiantly shook off the hand trying to grope her. The men in leather jackets laughed, not caring about her wrath at all. One of the guys turned to leer at Floey, eyeing her up and down before licking his lips. Hey, this foreign girl is really something. I wonder if Boss Gary will let us have a go. Aha, keep dreaming. This is a present the boss plans to give to a big shot in the inner city district. If you dare touch her, the boss will definitely twist your head off. And not just the one on your neck. The others burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a scream. Everyone was shocked. An Iron Fist gang member had a scarlet crossbow arrow sticking out of his chest. The crossbow arrow dissipated like smoke, but the man who had been shot screamed even more miserably. The wound expanded at a visible rate, as if an invisible mouth was tearing and nibbling at it. Hungry. I'm so hungry. He suddenly roared in a low voice, eyes red, and grabbed a companion next to him to bite. This bestial act startled the others. The unlucky one caught by him wasn't quick enough to react and was bitten through the carotid artery, blood spattering out. In just a moment, 2 people lay in a pool of blood, one dead and one severely injured. The remaining Iron Fist gang members were both shocked and furious. Across a road, under the dim moonlight, a man slowly walked over. His face wasn't clear, but he was holding a hand crossbow, and there was a stray dog at his feet. Lift hand, aim, pull the trigger. Get down! An Iron Fist gang member shouted. But it was too late. The light twang of the string was accompanied by a red streak across the night. Whoosh! Another man in a leather jacket fell to the ground, screaming in pain. I'm so hungry. His flesh disappeared out of thin air as he struggled to get up, wanting nothing but to gorge. Eat! I want to eat back what I've lost. Bang! The nearest man in a leather jacket punched him in the face to avoid being bitten. The mad hand unleashed a burst of air, greatly increasing the force of the punch. The powerful impact immediately broke his neck. The guy's head tilted to one side, he staggered a few steps, then fell to the ground with a thud. Dead on the spot. Damn it! What the hell is this thing? A few Iron Fist gang members lay on the ground, shivering with fear. As the man slowly approached, they could see his true face. A young man with curly black hair, looking at them expressionlessly. His emerald green vertical pupils radiated coldness. Have you ever seen hunger blossom? Chapter 38. A member of the Iron Fist gang cursed aloud. He scrambled up and charged at Chen Lun, swinging the iron fist of Mad Hand fiercely, wanting to smash this strange man's head with one punch. Smack! Chen Lun casually raised his hand and caught his fist. Hiss! Steam jetted out from the air holes on either side of Mad Hand, but the flesh that enveloped it remained perfectly still. The Iron Fist gang members' eyes widened in disbelief. Mad Hand, blocked! Woo! Chen Lun's other hand clenched into a fist, drawing a long shadow. The next instant, it landed heavily on his face. Bang! The entire face of the Iron Fist gang member fractured, like crumbling blocks. His body reeled backward, flung several meters by the powerful impact, and smashed to the ground with a thud. Mr. Jack, so amazing! Connie couldn't help but cheer secretly. When the chaos had erupted, Floey had taken the opportunity to pull her aside to hide. Now, seeing Chen Lun arrive, both of their hearts experienced different changes. Connie was incredibly excited. She had already despaired, knowing what it meant for her and Miss Floey to be brought here. The notorious Iron Fist gang was the nightmare of Outer City District's residents, and the muddy riverside was a place even more feared, akin to hell. Facing these men, the future for 2 young girls would likely be worse than death. Kill them! Mr. Jack! Connie gritted her teeth and quietly cheered Chen Lun on. Floey turned her head towards her with some surprise. Seeming to notice Floey's gaze, Connie awkwardly shrank her head back. Oh my god! That's so unladylike! Why did I say such vulgar words? Floey turned her attention away from the socially dead Connie and focused entirely on the man. He has appeared again, at a time when I am in trouble. Just like brother. Floey pursed her lips, then shook her head slightly. No, not the same. Bang. An explosion sounded. Countless fine nails and shards of glass sprayed towards Chen Lun. Feeling a trace of danger, Chen Lun quickly dodged to the side. Hiss hiss hiss. The strangely shaped blunderbuss, much like a short-barreled shotgun, had an even broader area of destruction. Even with Chen Lun's level of agility, he couldn't completely dodge it at such close range. He took a hit on one arm, his pristine white shirt tearing open in several places. He's been shot. Fire at will and kill him. The Iron Fist gang member who had fired the gun shouted excitedly. Upon hearing this, the other men in leather jackets also pulled out their blunderbusses and began shooting at Chen Lun. Bang! Bang bang bang! A continuous barrage of blasts, as small objects overwhelmed Chen Lun. Nails, glass shards, steel pellets and even pebbles struck him all over, covering several meters around him. He had no space to dodge. Mr. Jack! No! Connie cried out, unable to watch and covering her eyes. Although Floey knew Chen Lun was a transcendent, she had never witnessed him fighting in battle. Her heart couldn't help but race. Crackle and pop. Such saturation firing tore Chen Lun's clothes to shreds. Dust filled the air. The Iron Fist gang members looked thrilled. You blind son of bitches, daring to mess with us, this is what you get. Twee. A man in a leather jacket spat on the ground out of spite. Woof. Woof woof. The stray dog that had followed Chen Lun barked furiously at the Iron Fist gang members. Shit. And you damn dog. An Iron Fist gang member loaded his blunderbuss with nails and raised it towards the stray dog. You go first, little dog. The dust cleared, revealing the figure of Chen Lun. He waved his hand behind him, and the stray dog understood his gesture, whining twice before scampering off. Good boy. The leading task was complete, it could now retreat with its mission accomplished. Hell! The members of the Iron Fist gang stared with wide eyes. This guy is still not dead? With that intense gunfire just now, even an Iron Man should be riddled with holes. Beneath Chen Lun's tattered clothes shimmered a dark golden light. He lifted his head and grinned ferociously. Although the carp armor protected him, the sheer number of forced one damage still caused him to lose a chunk of his health. Everyone present here is going to die. As his words fell, his figure had already vanished. The guy who was about to shoot the stray dog suddenly shifted his arm, firing the blunderbuss forward. Bang! An accident occurred. The blunderbuss in his hand exploded in a flash, scattering fragments and nails in every direction. Damn it! He cursed, his body covered in fine wounds. Luckily the protection of the Iron Fist covered his hands, or he would have lost his entire palm. Whack! A side kick. The Iron Fist gang member, who had just been relieved that he wore the mad hand and escaped the blunderbuss threat, had his head and above parts vanish in an instant. As if wiped away by an eraser. The headless body fell with a thump, stirring up dust. Kill him! Kill him now! The remaining few members of the Iron Fist gang screamed with red-necked horror. Bang! 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 The one who had taken Floey's flintlock gun fired 3 shots in a row. The figure bathed in a dark golden glow dodged left and right like a spectre, appearing in front of the shooter the next second. All empty shots. A pair of killing intent-filled green vertical pupils stared squarely at him. No. An arm shot out like a python, the hand grasping and biting down on his neck. Arg! Chen Lun grasped him like a rag doll, tossing him toward the others. With a few clinks, they all collapsed twistedly on the ground. Let hunger blossom. Chen Lun pulled the trigger twice. Whir whir. The bowstring of the tongue of gluttony trembled, and 2 crimson crossbow bolts hit 2 men squarely. Hungry. The men struck by the arrows suddenly rose in a frenzy, grabbing and savagely biting into the person beneath them. Screams and gnawing sounds intertwined. Unable to stomach the bloody scene, Connie looked away. The last 2, mouths filled with blood, turned on each other, biting and consuming one another. Until they were destroyed. Phew! Chen Lun exhaled. Using the hand crossbow had drained quite a bit of his physical strength. He could have killed these Iron Fist gang members in a more effortless way. But he chose not to. Not just because they dared to lay hands on Floey and disrupted his plans. Another reason was, he wanted to test the hand crossbow in real combat. The results satisfied him. "Mr. Jack, are you all right?" Connie hurried over. Floey picked up her flintlock gun and secretly hid it behind her back. She looked at Chen Lun as usual, then in silence, her expression softened with concern. Chen Lun shook his head. The animal-like features on his body had vanished, and he had returned to his original appearance. "I'm fine." Connie was quite shocked to witness Chen Lun's inhuman performance, but she dared not ask too much, feeling that Mr. Jack was becoming more and more mysterious. The supernaturals were too much of a worldview shock for Connie to digest all at once. "Floey, you go back first," Chen Lun instructed. "MHM." Floey didn't ask what he was going to do but nodded obediently. Chapter 39. The stray dog appeared again. It wagged its tail and darted to Chen Lun's feet. "You haven't left yet? Perfect, I need your help with something." He patted the dog's head. Then his fingers moved slightly, and a faint light appeared on his fingertips. He opened his mouth slightly and let out a loud meow. 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 Responses came from all directions. Immediately, countless green eyes emerged in the darkness. Connie and Floey were startled. There were at least 30 to 40 different stray cats gathering around. "They will escort you back, don't worry." Chen Lun turned his head to look at the two girls. "Ah, is this all real?" Connie was first startled, then somewhat dazed. What a surreal night this has been. They encountered danger, experienced a rescue, witnessed a perilous battle, and now were being escorted home by so many kittens. Woof! The stray dog, like a lead big brother, led the other cats around the feet of Floey and Connie. It seemed to signal, "Don't worry big brother, with us here, no horny dogs will come harassing them. Be careful." Floey said softly. Chen Lun nodded, giving a reassuring look. Just don't know if Floey could understand it. Afterward, Floey took Connie and followed the cats and dog away. Watching them disappear from view, Chen Lun bent over and picked up a blunderbuss from the ground. Raging Fire homemade firearm. Item description: craftsmen have developed this gunpowder flintlock gun through self-study and creation, with rough craftsmanship and distinctive ideas. This weapon was made. The widened muzzle endows it with potent lethality at close range and does not restrict the ammunition used. A handful of crushed iron sand, and it blasts a person to bits. Of course, its negligible flaw is that it's not very stable, prone to barrel explosions, and a bit cumbersome to use. After reading the description, Chen Lun couldn't help but think of those iron fist gloves. Mad hand, could it be specifically crafted to be used with this thing? The more he thought about it, the more it seemed so. He also admired the craftsmen who created these items. Their thought process was incredible. He turned to glance at the sign next to the stairs labeled the drain and walked straight down. When he truly entered the drain, his first impression was that it was filthy, messy, and stank. A foul smell hit his nose right away. Chen Lun frowned slightly and quickened his pace. He passed by many cottages along the way, most of which were dilapidated. Since the lamplighter would not come here to light lamps, the residents would hang a simple lantern at their doorways. It was like a candle covered by a fishbowl. The faint light shone across the embankment walkway, directly opposite the large and wide sewage moat. Not far away, a neon sign flickered, and he could vaguely make out the words Flora and Fauna Tavern. Soon, Chen Lun arrived at the entrance of the tavern and pushed open the great gate. Clang! Noise and heat waves hit him in the face. Inside, it was bustling and extremely lively. In stark contrast to the dead silence and chill outside, it was like a different world. A bunch of drunken patrons glanced at him, then paid no more attention and continued to immerse themselves in the pleasures of gambling and flirting with the maids. "Hey, handsome, looking for some fun?" The flamboyantly dressed proprietress came over, smiling obsequiously. A hint of wariness flashed in her eyes. Although the young man with black hair was dressed in tattered clothes, his appearance and demeanor clearly did not fit in with the surroundings. Moreover, the chill emanating from him now made people shiver involuntarily. "Madam, may I ask if the Iron Fist Gang's stronghold is here?" Chen Lun asked politely in a soft voice. The tavern mistress leaned in close, and the smell of her cheap perfume was somewhat overpowering, making him want to sneeze. "Excuse me, sir? Are you in the wrong place?" The landlady vehemently denied entry, revealing a strained smile. She had a strong premonition that this man was definitely here to cause trouble. An officer from the security office? Or some guy from another gang? Chen Lun gave her a slight smile, pushed past her, and headed straight inside. He had already gotten his answer from the woman's behavior. Sir? Sir? Where are you going? The landlady suddenly became anxious, feeling that she couldn't stop this man, so she ran back to the counter. She took out an old walkie-talkie from the drawer below, ready to tip off the Iron Fist gang members in the courtyard. Squeak! At that moment, several large black rats darted out and bit her hand. Ah! Damn it! The landlady was startled, and the walkie-talkie fell to the ground in pain. Then those few rats immediately picked it up and carried it away like a coffin, quickly fleeing the scene. The landlady froze. The rats! The rats took my walkie-talkie! Chen Lun roughly pushed past the drinkers and maids blocking the way, causing a chorus of grumbles and gasps. You little punk! A scruffy drunkard who looked like he hadn't bathed in decades glared, reaching out to grab Chen Lun's collar, ready to give him a good lesson. But a flintlock gun was promptly pressed against his forehead. Sir? If you want to die, I can assist you. Chen Lun said with a smile. Sorry. The drunkard instantly broke into a cold sweat, his raised hand retracted to his chest, showing an ugly smile as he slowly backed away. Ah! A scream erupted. The maids in the store were so frightened by the scene that they hid. Other patrons also began to get up in a frantic rush, distancing themselves amid a clamorous uproar. Chen Lun ignored them and kept moving forward. A number of cautious drinkers had already sensed something was amiss and quietly left the tavern. Chen Lun passed through the kitchen, snatched up a chef's knife on the way. He then pushed open the door and entered the courtyard. Who's there? A voice called out in challenge. Iron Fist gang members were practicing their strikes on wooden targets in the yard when they heard the door open and looked over. Your good friend, Jack. Two men in leather jackets exchanged glances, one ran towards the building, and the other came forward. Jack? Don't know him. He said coldly. If you're in the wrong place, get lost already. Not likely. Whoosh! A flash of cold light. The sharp chef's knife slashed across the man's throat. The leather jacket man gurgled a few sounds, clutching his neck as he collapsed. Then Chen Lun threw the chef's knife in his hand, which sliced through the air with a shriek and struck the other man in the back. Due to the momentum of running, that man lunged forward several meters, convulsed on the ground, and then lay silent. Chen Lun strode forward. The light from the tavern behind him shone through the window, casting his shadow long, dragging it toward the building. Passing by two large warehouses, Chen Lun faintly heard the sounds of clanking inside and pondered for a moment. But he didn't have time to care, heading straight into the building. At that time, there were only a handful of Iron Fist gang members in the hall, and Boss Gary sat on a sofa like a king, reading some documents. Hey! Who are you? Seeing a stranger waltzing into their gang's territory, a few of the card-playing Iron Fist gang members abruptly stood up. They stared at Chen Lun with wariness. Gary also shifted his gaze from the documents in his hands to the stranger at the door, his eyes narrowing. Who might you be? Coming to our Iron Fist gang this late, do you have pressing business? Murder. Chapter 40. At Gary's command, the Iron Fist gang members immediately charged toward Chen Lun. The lackeys in the courtyard had been silent, mostly already killed by this man. He squinted, pondering. He casually took out a cigar from the box, cut it, and lit it up. Aside from the big shots in the inner city district, no one dares to talk to me like this. Since you're so eager to seek death, I'll grant you your wish. Gary spoke slowly, puffing out smoke, looking unfazed. He had faced men seeking revenge before, but those men had long since merged with the sewage in the drainage ditches. Bang bang! 2 gunshots rang out. The 2 Iron Fist gang members who were in front fell to the ground. The rest of the gang members were startled, halting their advance. A repeating firearm. Gary's finger paused, fixating on the flintlock gun in Chen Lun's hand. Are you an investigator from the shelter? He rose slowly, his expression grave. Gary was not just a simple gang leader, he had connections with many prominent figures in the inner city district. Many shady and dirty tasks were entrusted to him, through which he gained relationships and assistance from those figures. It was these intricate connections that allowed him to become the king of the sewage beach in the outer city district. Naturally, Gary had heard some secrets about the mystic realm. What about an investigator? Kill him. Gary's eyes glinted with ruthlessness. If that was the case, he couldn't let this man leave alive. There were secrets hidden here, and if the investigator found out, the big figures behind him would surely make him regret it. The sewage beach wasn't lacking others who could take Gary's place as boss. As for the possibility of offending the shelter by killing an investigator, Gary believed someone would help him smooth over the trouble. Fire! On hearing their boss Gary's order, the lackeys pulled out their iron gloves and blunderbusses. They then surrounded and attacked Chen Lun. Bang 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 bang! Shotgun pellets and glass shards burst from the barrels, crackling like fireworks, showering towards Chen Lun. Chen Lun, already on guard, didn't take the hits like before. The moment these men pulled out their weapons, he leaped forcefully, grabbing one to use as a human shield. A burst of muffled thuds followed, and the Iron Fist gang member used as a meat shield was riddled with holes on the spot. Covered in blood, he was as good as dead. Holding the body with one hand, Chen Lun leaned out to counterattack. Bang bang, several gunshots, the lead bullets accurately hit the enemy's heads, bursting into blossoms of blood. Seeing the blunderbuss couldn't harm Chen Lun, the remaining few leather jacket men decided to tighten their iron fists and charged for hand-to-hand combat. Bang! The body, riddled with shards of metal and glass, flew out, crashing into one man, knocking him down. Chen Lun followed immediately, landing a punch on another Iron Fist gang member's face. The punch, driven by 24 points of strength, was an immense pressure that a regular person couldn't withstand. The man's skull shattered instantly, and he flew backward, spitting out blood and broken teeth. Enough! A bunch of useless trash! Gary dropped his cigar and leaped forward, kicking straight down from above. Whoosh! His burly body fell down, his kick chopping like a battle axe. Crack! Chen Lun turned and raised his hand to block, staunchly catching the kick. Gary's pupil shrank, taken aback. He was very clear about his own strength. Due to regularly injecting the high-concentration nectar provided by the butler Fedman, he had developed physical abilities far beyond those of an ordinary person. His kick that could penetrate a steel plate was blocked by this investigator with one hand. "Haven't you eaten, sir?" Chen Lun's face appeared from behind his arm, with a polite smile. "You don't have the strength to hit people, and you call yourself a gang member. Bastard!" Gary was infuriated. He leaped into the air, and as he twisted his body, another foot shot out like a cannonball. In the process, the bulging of his muscles even tore the leg of his suit pants. Bang! The leather shoe hammered mercilessly into Chen Lun's palm. But the next instant, the rebounding force caused Gary's leg to go numb. The other's handprint didn't budge at all, and he himself felt as if he had stepped on an iron wall. "The strength is decent, but it is still far from that old fellow at the Red Apple Church," Chen Lun said softly. Gary's heart tightened, knowing that he had encountered a formidable enemy. He took a leap back to create distance, catching sight of the dark golden scales slowly retracting on the back of Chen Lun's hand. His heart pounded wildly. "A transcendent!" Gary exclaimed. Sweat poured down like rain, and he felt as if he had hit rock bottom. Why did he have to provoke a transcendent? "Who exactly are you? If I have offended you in any way, I sincerely apologize to you," Gary said gravely. He was someone who knew the score. Facing an opponent he could not contend with, he immediately chose to bow down. The other was most likely not an investigator. The transcendents of the shelter were all the big shots with group leaders' status. Although Iron Fist gang was rampant in the outer city district, it was not significant enough to attract such attention. Seeing this, the other members of Iron Fist gang looked at each other, a sense of fear growing within them. Even Boss Gary was softening up. How terrifying was this man? "Haven't you been looking for me?" Chen Lun moved closer step by step. "And even planning to capture my sister?" Gary quivered violently, his body freezing in place. He instantly understood the identity of the man before him. This was the out-of-towner his men and Kent had been talking about. Damn it, an out-of-towner? This was not a little lamb with no background or status, but rather, a bloodthirsty python. A terrifying beast. Gary no longer had time to vent his anger on his subordinates and that idiot Kent. Now he only wanted to save his life. Plop! Gary Bent, the leader of Iron Fist gang, knelt before this young man. His burly, strong body could not withstand the fear at this moment. "I, Gary Bent, apologize to you. I am willing to pay any price, only begging for your forgiveness and to spare my life." Gary lowered his head, speaking in a slightly hoarse voice. The members of Iron Fist Gang who were lucky enough to survive could hardly believe their eyes at this scene. Their boss Gary, who was decisive in killing and has a heart of stone, was actually kneeling. He was begging that dark-haired youth for mercy. Gurgle. A man in a leather jacket swallowed, not daring to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead for fear of drawing attention. Chen Lun looked helplessly at the spineless guy in front of him. Can't you show a bit of backbone? Rise in rebellion, rush at me in a fit of hysteria, let me slaughter you effortlessly, no? You're making this difficult for me. Suddenly, Chen Lun seemed to think of something, a contemplative look flashing in his eyes. You said, any price is acceptable. He slowly walked to the sofa and sat down, picking up the documents Gary had been looking at earlier. They contained some financial reports, funds from the sewage beach and the outer city district industries, as well as certain expenditures that were not specified. Yes, sir, any price. Gary said through clenched teeth. He had already prepared himself for a significant loss, but as long as he could survive, nothing else mattered. Since that's the case. Chen Lun tossed the documents in his hand away. From now on, this place answers to me. Chapter 41. Your Excellency? What do you mean by this? He looked utterly shocked. He had only intended to bleed himself dry to save his life, but now the other party was indicating they wanted to take over the place. Those two warehouses outside, they're full of the craftsmen you've captured, aren't they? Chen Lun's tone was light, as if he was discussing something perfectly ordinary. However, to Gary's ears, the words rang like a thunderclap. You. Gary quickly suppressed his emotions and took a deep breath. It seems you're already aware, he said. Chen Lun nodded and casually threw a pair of mad hand and a blunderbuss onto the table with two clattering sounds. You kidnapped so many craftsmen just to make these two things. A faint light radiated from the seashell necklace at Chen Lun's chest. A struggle flashed in Gary's eyes, then he sighed and his expression became one of resignation. You guys, come over here. He beckoned without turning his head. Boss. The remaining members of the Iron Fist Gang looked at each other and hurried over. Just as they arrived at their boss's side, however, Gary suddenly exploded into action. He sprang to his feet, punched one man in the throat with crushing force, elbowed another in the temple, and then grabbed the last one by the neck. The man's face turned red, staring at his own boss in disbelief. Grimness spread across Gary's face. Sorry, but tonight's events can't get out. The things I said can't be heard by you guys either. With that, he squeezed tightly and snapped the neck of his underling. Thump. The body fell to the ground. Chen Lun watched the scene with interest, gaining a deeper understanding of the Iron Fist Gang leader's ruthlessness. Only then did Gary turn around to face Chen Lun, with a respectful expression on his face. Your Excellency, capturing the craftsman was not my idea, but an order from Butler Fedman. Chen Lun became intrigued. Butler Fedman. He's the butler of Councillor Daniel of the Amber City Council, Gary said in a grave voice. A long time ago, Butler Fedman found me when I was still just a nobody lurking around the sewage beach. He had me establish the Iron Fist Gang and gave me a great deal of help. Later, one day, he gave me a blueprint and told me to capture craftsmen to make something for him, but the results have never been satisfactory. Chen Lun frowned slightly. He hadn't expected the Iron Fist Gang to be connected to that counselor. Could there be a relation to the future glutton Dolly? Do you still have that blueprint? Chen Lun asked. Gary shook his head slightly. The original blueprint has been taken back, now there's only a copied version left. It's underneath the second-to-last drawer to the right of where you're standing, there's a hidden compartment. Following Gary's direction, Chen Lun opened the hidden compartment in the drawer and retrieved a copy of the blueprint. But after a glance, he shook his head in disappointment. Mad Hand Prototype Drawing Palm Fireworks, copy. Item description, structural analysis and manufacturing drawings for a mechanical glove. A badly deformed copy that had significantly diverged from the original design. No wonder the iron gloves that were made were such rubbish, it's not entirely the craftsman's fault that their skills weren't up to par, Chen Lun mused to himself. He then recalled the mission he received before arriving, in which one of the rewards was the original blueprint. Looking at the worthless copy in his hand, he felt a sudden sense of disappointment. Recently, Butler Fedman has been urging ever more insistently, and the Iron Fist Gang has to hand over a large portion of their monthly income to him, Gary continued. Do you know what his purpose is? Chen Lun asked. Gary shook his head, saying, I don't know, Your Excellency. Chen Lun pondered. Intuition told him that everything was the will of Congressman Daniel. What exactly did he want to do? An ordinary politician, gathering funds and weapons, could he be thinking of rebellion? Chen Lun couldn't help but be amused by his own speculation. In the face of the two colossal forces, the Sun Church and the Shelter, no one or organization dared to talk about overthrowing the Tresor Empire. Not even the Red Apple Church. In his previous life, they ravaged the empire but still met their ultimate demise. If Congressman Daniel was really that naive, he didn't deserve his many years of high-standing influence. Only the mysterious can confront the mysterious, only the extraordinary can kill the extraordinary. This was the unwritten rule of the mystic realm. Of course, except for the low sequence. Chen Lun fell silent. How much liquid funds does the Iron Fist gang have now? He asked a question of personal interest. Gary hesitated and slowly said. Yesterday, Butler Fedman already took this month's income. There are still 7 gold pounds and over 40 silver ducats in the gang. He looked a bit embarrassed. Raising his head cautiously and noticing the polite yet eerie smile on the young man with black hair, his heart skipped a beat. Thus, he quickly added. I have also stashed some money myself, about 40 gold pounds. He had originally intended to use this money to save his own life, but now it seemed he still couldn't keep it. Chen Lun nodded in satisfaction. Good, then you take 45 gold pounds for me, and have your craftsman make me a batch of lead bullets. After offering praise, he issued the order directly. At the same time, he used the mermaid's song once more to perform deeper hypnosis on Gary. This was to prevent a betrayal from Gary once he left. Gary's eyes became vacant for a moment and then returned to normal, but his expression became more respectful, even with a hint of eagerness to please. I shall obey your will, Your Excellency. He placed his left hand on the right side of his chest and bowed in salute. Then he turned and went upstairs, returning after a short while with an exquisitely carved wooden box, which he gently placed on the table. Chen Lun opened the box, and inside, the glittering coins shone brightly, pleasing him greatly. Using the box lid to block the view, he secretly extended a finger into the box to touch the gold coins, bringing them all into the panel. Clap! The lid closed. Next, I will entrust you with 2 matters, which you must treat as your most urgent tasks. Chen Lun spoke gravely. Please instruct me, I will do my utmost. Gary seemed somewhat excited, showing a readiness to complete the tasks as if fulfilling Chen Lun's wishes was a great honor for him. Chen Lun silently marveled at the astonishing effect of Mermaid's song. It was almost like turning an enemy into his madly devout follower, akin to brainwashing. But there were significant limitations, as it had little effect on those with strong willpower. Also, many psychic defensive mysterious objects had a restraining effect on it. The golden apple necklace once worn by Priest Carter was a typical example. Help me investigate recent news about Viscount Pompey, and get me his family's detailed address. Also, keep an eye on someone named Dolly. Any related intelligence must be reported to me immediately. Yes, Your Excellency. You have slain many members of the Iron Fist gang and successfully enslaved their leader, Gary, completing the sea-level task, King of the Sewage Beach. You receive the task reward, 1000 experience points 1 gold pound, and Mad Hand prototype drawing palm fireworks 1. Chen Lun stood up and slowly left the territory of the Iron Fist gang. He left behind a ground littered with corpses and the Iron Fist gang's leader Gary, who remained bowed in salute for a long time. Chapter 42. The purple moon was obscured by drifting clouds, dimming the light. He dimly made out a petite figure standing in front of the stairway. You're back. A familiar ethereal voice drifted over. Upon hearing the voice, Chen Lun realized the person waiting for him here was Floey. Haven't you slept yet? Standing here waiting for me. Chen Lun replied, then added with a light chuckle. Let's go, head upstairs to rest. Floey quietly stood in the darkness without speaking, merely giving him a slight smile. Floey followed Chen Lun upstairs, returning to the room on the 4th floor. As soon as he opened the door, Chen Lun saw a furry creature pouncing toward him. Hey! It's you again, you dog! Chen Lun exclaimed in surprise. It had been dark outside, and he hadn't paid much attention, but it appeared this fellow was a black and white border collie. It had been roaming outside for quite a while, its fur dirty and matted. At first glance, it looked like a black dog. The dog licked his hand, eyes pleading for favor. You aren't planning on sticking around, are you? Chen Lun eyed it sideways, his expression curious. The dog whined softly a few times, and its wagging tail slowly stopped. It lowered its head and slowly walked toward the door. At the doorway, it turned its head for one last look at Chen Lun. Seeing no reaction from Chen Lun, it turned to glance at Floey. Unfortunately, Floey, being blind, didn't catch the dog signaling with its eyes. Truly a drama queen. Chen Lun sighed internally, then beckoned with his hand. All right, you can stay for now. The stray's tail shook like a windshield wiper, and it trotted back with its tongue out. It tried to jump up to give Chen Lun a doggy hug but missed as Chen Lun dodged. It thumped onto the ground with a flop. The dog looked up at Chen Lun with a pitiful expression, but Chen Lun turned to Floey. Floey, have Connie give it a bath tomorrow. Sure. Floey nodded. She stood in the living room, sensing Chen Lun turning to head to his own room, and spoke softly. Thank you. It was unclear if she was thanking him for taking in the dog or for saving her just in time. Chen Lun didn't turn back as he waved his hand. Get some rest soon, it's very late. With that, the door gently closed. Chen Lun pulled up a chair and sat down. The table faced a window, through which he could see the purple moon, half hidden behind clouds. He silently claimed his mission reward in his heart. Suddenly, a blueprint appeared in his hands, drastically different from the one he had seen at the Iron Fist Gang stronghold. Mad Hand Prototype Blueprint Palm Fireworks. Item description: a painting imbued with supernatural power. A mysterious realm's master painter had copied a mysterious object, a peculiar mechanical glove. If a highly skilled craftsman were to study it long enough, there might be a small chance to create an exact replica. Chen Lun nodded. This was indeed how the Mad Hand should look. Whatever the Iron Fist Gang had created was a mess. Having secured the blueprint, he had a premonition it would be useful in the future. Then, he took out an old book he had received from Kent. Recorder Ken Burney's memoirs. When he first saw the book, he had a hunch, and now was the time to test it. He opened the book and began to read. Soon, he felt invigorated. You've discovered a book containing valuable knowledge about a sub-profession. By careful reading, you've gained complete knowledge of the sub-profession. Recorder. You meet the conditions to inherit it. Would you like to make it your new sub-profession? Chen Lun's eyebrows shot up, and he naturally chose to inherit it. You've learned the skill transcription LV1. Just as he had guessed, this book indeed hid that sub-profession. He was secretly delighted. Recorder was a rather special sub-occupation. One might say it was useless or that it was incredibly powerful because its contribution to combat power was minimal, yet it was a top-tier logistical sub-occupation. In the past life, it was exclusive to a small group of high-end lifestyle players and only those large guilds had the resources to nurture one. Because it was very rare and cost a fortune. In the era of mystery, transcendent sequence knowledge was a consumable item. For instance, after Chen Lun finished reading the Beast Tamer's Handbook, if a second person read it, they would gain nothing. But having the recorder sub-occupation allowed one to transcribe any transcendent sequence knowledge by consuming corresponding mystical substances. This transcribed transcendent knowledge was effective. Simply put, it could achieve mass production of transcendence. However, this was limited to knowledge of low sequences, and each transcription consumed a large amount of sanity value. Therefore, the large guilds had to provide sufficient mystical substances and precious items that could restore sanity value to continuously acquire transcendent knowledge. This was where the cost came in. Aside from the consortium-backed large guilds, ordinary people couldn't afford it. But even though it was costly, any large guild would desire to have more recorders. Only then could they have a core competitiveness and attractiveness greater than other forces. Lone wolves would be more willing to join them, just for a ticket to the transcendent world. Era of Mystery was different from the usual holographic online games. The main occupation was not preset from the beginning. To become a transcendent, one could only rely on their own efforts and opportunities. Otherwise, they would remain ordinary for life. Many players entered the game and were unable to find transcendent knowledge, which left them frustrated. In the late phase of the past life's version 1.0, Chen Lun had seen many ordinary players stuck at level 30, without a main occupation. It was quite tragic. But in fact, they just needed to join a large guild, and after signing a contract, they could get a piece of transcendent knowledge for free, thus becoming a transcendent. But clearly, these players were not willing to kneel and accept restrictions. They would rather be mediocre than lose their freedom. But was there a way to obtain transcendent knowledge while standing upright? There wasn't before, but now there was. Chen Lun thought that once players arrived, he could use this sub-occupation to duplicate various transcendent knowledge for sale, to help. But knowledge isn't free, as you understand. This was to cultivate the players' respect for knowledge, to let them study diligently, and understand the noble principle that knowledge changes destiny. Chen Lun was very moved by his own good intentions. He decided he must charge even more, to make them feel the weight of knowledge. He believed that compared to freedom, money was nothing. Chen Lun spent nearly 3,000 experience points to max out the recorder sub-occupation level. He then invested 4 skill points to max out transcription LV1. Transcription of max provided an additional memory function, which imprinted acquired transcendent sequence knowledge in his mind. He no longer needed the original books to transcribe. Sub-occupation level increased, you feel your body has strengthened, life limit plus 20, physical strength limit plus 10, sanity limit plus 2, intelligence plus 4, faith plus 2. You have gained 9 skill points, 9 attribute points. Total level reached 30. This was the level cap for players in public test version 1.0, but not Chen Lun's level cap. Because he was not a mystical player. Now, I only lack the transcendent knowledge for advancing to sequence 8, no rush for that. Chen Lun pondered, then silently thought. Panel. Name, Chen Lun. Race, Human, Eastern Continent. Template, NPC, countdown to version 1.0 public test, 391 days, 02 hours, 34 minutes, 15 seconds. Level, 30. Experience, 11,000/380. Life, 234/280. Physical strength, 112/180. Sanity, 6/8. Main occupation, Beast Tamer LV10, Max, Destiny Faction. Sub-occupations, Fisherman LV10, Max, Recorder LV10, Max. Attributes, Strength 24, 2, Agility 16, Endurance 9, plus 2, Intelligence 12, Faith 5. Special attributes, Charm 7, plus 2, Willpower 5, Insight 3, Luck 3. Regional Fame, 1. Remaining points, 12 skill points, 14 attribute points. Remaining assets, 221 gold pounds, 721 silver ducats, 4,755 copper crow, low sequence flesh faction mysterious substance 7. Skills, quick reflexes LV1, passive, seafaring balance LV1, passive, beast speech of max, animal mimicry of max, friend of animals of max, passive, transcription of max. Combat power, 32. Evaluation, you are a qualified low-end transcendent, very adequately low-end. Chapter 43. Chen Lun sleepily pushed open his bedroom door. After a battle the previous night, both his body and mind were weary. He glanced up to find a striking figure mopping the living room floor. Good morning, Mr. Jack. Connie stood up, wiping the sweat from her forehead, and gave him a radiant smile. Clearly, her mood was good today. Good morning, Connie. Chen Lun responded and entered the bathroom. After freshening up, he came out just in time to see Floey coming in through the door. The freshly bathed dog, wagging its tail excitedly, darted out from behind Floey and pounced at Chen Lun's feet. Did you go to Mrs. Caroline's for a meal? Chen Lun asked Floey while patting the dog's head. I learned how to cook some dishes from Mrs. Caroline, I made these with her. In Floey's hands was a plate filled with some meatballs and pies, along with an apple and a cup of tea. She pursed her lips, facing Chen Lun, her tone filled with anticipation. I brought some over, would you like to try? Chen Lun smiled and took the plate. Of course. Floey revealed a smile. She quietly listened to Chen Lun's footsteps until he stopped by the dining table. Chen Lun set down the food and noticed Connie, still cleaning. Have you eaten, Connie? Would you like to join me? Connie seemed somewhat flustered and quickly shook her head. No, no need, Mr. Jack. She pointed in the direction of the door. I'll go downstairs to make breakfast soon, and I need to prepare one for my father too. All right then. Chen Lun shrugged and started eating. He picked up a meatball, and under Floey's expectant gaze, he popped it into his mouth. The delicious juice overflowed, with a hint of the unique smoky flavor of smoked meat and a touch of fruitiness. Delicious! Chen Lun exclaimed in surprise. It seems you have a real talent, Floey. Thanks for the compliment. Floey giggled softly, covering her mouth, and elegantly sat down on the sofa. It could be said that Chen Lun was very comfortable with his breakfast today, perhaps it was psychological, but he could feel the care put into making this meal. After eating, Connie promptly came over to clean up. Chen Lun wiped his mouth with a napkin and took a sip of tea. Connie, I heard you are taking courses at the technical college. Yes, Mr. Jack. I study mechanical theory at Cypress Leaf Technical College in Amber City. I'm very interested in that area of knowledge. Connie's lips curled up as she mentioned this. Chen Lun silently nodded. He got up and returned to his room, soon coming back with 2 items that he placed on the table. Connie, take these things and study them. Are these the weapons from those thugs last night? Connie picked up the mechanical glove and blunderbuss, her face showing surprise, then she looked excitedly at the items in her hands. Although they look roughly made, the ideas behind them are quite unique. I'm glad you're interested. Chen Lun said with a smile. Then he got up and walked towards the door, turned his head back to Floey and said. I'm going out for a walk, I'll be back later. Okay, be careful out there. Floey said softly, facing him. The news about Viscount Pompey and Dolly had been handed over to Gary. Chen Lun alone could never match the efficiency of the entire Iron Fist gang. They were an underground force in the outer city district, skilled in gathering intelligence from various sources. Moreover, with Gary's familiarity with the inner city district and his acquaintance with many important figures, it wouldn't be long before they had some results. Now, Chen Lun had other plans. Such as reading. After descending the stairs, he headed straight to the bookstore next to the flower shop. From Kent, he had obtained recorder Ken Burney's memoir, which had successfully granted him the recorder sub-occupation. This had given Chen Lun an insight. That was to seize every opportunity to acquire supernatural knowledge, as a seemingly unremarkable book might conceal a treasure. The Old Cripple's bookstore. Chen Lun glanced at the wooden sign and pushed open the door. An old man sitting behind the counter looked up at Chen Lun but didn't plan to stand up. Please feel free, but do not soil or damage the books. He stroked his presbyopic glasses and continued to look down at the thick tome in his hands. Chen Lun walked a few steps inside and noticed that although the bookstore was small, it was not short on books. Bookcases filled 3 walls, and another lay horizontally across the middle. He walked to the back and even noticed a mini spiral staircase leading up to an upper partition. Chen Lun looked back at the old man, who was absorbed in reading, paying no mind to him. So he quietly climbed the spiral staircase to the upper level. The space was cramped and narrow, he couldn't even stand straight but had to bend over. There was a window in the wall, and the lighting wasn't too dim. Similarly, the bookcases against the walls here were filled with books. Some books even piled up in a corner because there was no space left on the shelves. I'll start from here then. Chen Lun nodded in satisfaction. With such a large base, his chances of finding a book containing treasures were greater. Time always slipped away quietly while reading. He didn't know how much time had passed. Chen Lun's attention was suddenly caught by a familiar voice. Mr. Tao Ti, I'm here to return a few books. Oh, Miss Caroline, please do, and by the way, you look beautiful today. Then Mrs. Caroline's light laughter followed. You're always so witty, Mr. Tao Ti. The sun is my witness, I'm just an honest old chapter. Chen Lun put down the book in his hands and descended the spiral staircase. Mrs. Caroline was holding 2 books, chatting with the bespectacled old man behind the counter. Hey, little Jack. Mrs. Caroline was somewhat surprised to see Chen Lun, but she quickly greeted him. I just went upstairs looking for you. Little Floey said you had gone out, turns out you were here reading. She walked over slowly, smiling kindly. In my hometown, Amethyst City, there's a saying, a man who loves to read is like the sun, not even with both hands can you block his brilliance. Miss Caroline is saying you're a bright young man, lad, the old man interjected. Mrs. Caroline gave him a playful glance, which elicited a chuckle from the old man. While loving to read is a good thing, you shouldn't skip meals. Luckily, we can still make it back in time for dinner. Mrs. Caroline set down the books in her hands and motioned for Chen Lun to leave with her. Chen Lun looked outside at the evening sky, it was already night. Thank you for your trouble, Mrs. Caroline. You're too polite, little Jack. Speaking of which, little Floey and I learned a specialty dish that's perfect for dinner tonight, and you can have a real taste soon. I look forward to it. The two of them chatted briefly. He followed Mrs. Caroline out of the bookstore, heading toward the hallway. Yet, he sighed to himself. Unfortunately, he had rummaged through every book in the bookstore's upper partition and hadn't found any with supernatural knowledge. Although this was to be expected, today's lack of findings still bothered him slightly. I'll come back tomorrow and take another look. Chapter 44. The sound of knocking echoed. Mr. Jack. Chen Lun opened the great gate, and Connie stood outside, her face full of excitement, holding a mechanical glove and a blunderbuss in her hands. Mr. Jack, I think I have some ideas, but I'm not sure if they're feasible. Come in and talk. Chen Lun invited Connie into the house. The two sat down in the living room, where Chen Lun made her a cup of tea, which made Connie somewhat embarrassed. Thank you, Mr. Jack. You're welcome. Chen Lun glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 8:30 in the morning. It seemed that Connie was very interested in Mad Hand and Raging Fire, full of enthusiasm, coming over early to share her accomplishments. Fortunately, it was the weekend, so Connie didn't have to go to school, otherwise, she probably would have been preoccupied with this matter even there. If we modify the internal structure as I envision, and reinforce the barrel, the firearm could likely have its stability significantly increased, reducing the chances of a burst barrel. Connie pulled out a piece of paper filled with structural drawings and annotations. Chen Lun glanced at it briefly, not fully comprehending but simply appreciating the neat handwriting of Connie. Moreover, this weapon seems not to be too demanding on the ammunition, but I still think steel balls would be most suitable to decrease wear and increase its lifespan. As for this mechanical glove, I always feel like it's missing something, leading to some structurally redundant and ineffective designs. Connie spoke continuously for over 10 minutes, still appearing somewhat unfulfilled at the end. During this process, she talked about the effect of the ratchet pawl, the basic law of gear meshing, as well as the number of instantaneous centers of mechanisms and the three centers theorem, to all of which Chen Lun simply nodded. He maintained an expression that said, "Continue, I understand you." She took a sip of tea and glanced at Chen Lun with a slight embarrassment. Connie, it seems you indeed have a gift in this area. If you believe this approach is correct, then go ahead and try it. Chen Lun complimented her, sipping tea to conceal his own ignorance of the subject. In fact, he had allowed her to study Mad Hand and Raging Fire not truly to make improvements, but purely to see how talented she was in this field. It turned out, the girl was mostly a genius. Ah, thank you. Being recognized was very fulfilling, and Connie felt very happy. She suddenly remembered something, her expression turning troubled. It's just, Mr. Jack, if I am to modify the firearm, I need some tools and materials. I don't have them at home, I need to borrow them from a nearby workshop. Connie spoke very tactfully, but Chen Lun knew she was short of money, so he generously gave her 10 gold pounds. Mr. Jack, that's too much, I just need to buy some materials, and pay some usage fees. Plus, I know the people at the workshop, hee. However, Connie only took 1 gold coin and pushed the rest back. Chen Lun smiled, taking out another and placing it in Connie's hand. The extra is your reward. Thank you. Mr. Jack, you truly are a generous gentleman. I must have misunderstood you before. Connie blushed, visibly embarrassed. It's all right. Chen Lun shook his head unconcernedly. Well then, Mr. Jack, I should get going now. Connie bowed slightly, took her things, and left. After she was gone, Floey appeared behind Chen Lun. You seem to admire her a lot. Yes, she is very talented in mechanics. I was only trying her out, but it turns out I really found a gem. Floey nodded, not continuing the topic about Connie, but instead asked. Are you going to Mrs. Caroline's for dinner? No need, you go today. Chen Lun waved his hands awkwardly. He couldn't help but recall last night's dinner at Mrs. Caroline's. Mrs. Caroline first felt regret over Kent's sudden departure, she seemed to know something too. She lambasted those gang members from the outer city district at the dinner table, suggesting that Kent was likely driven away by them. Chen Lun just kept his head down and ate. Kent had been killed by him, and he didn't feel it was appropriate to say much. Wearing the surging badge, he had a big appetite and just focused on his meal. Besides, Mrs. Caroline continually inquired whether he had found work yet, discussing how tough life in the outer city district was and asking about matters concerning moving in with relatives. Chen Lun couldn't possibly tell the truth, so he glossed over it with a few words. At that time, Floey was quietly observing on the sidelines. Fortunately, she eventually spoke up to ask Mrs. Caroline about cooking, which shifted her attention away. Chen Lun couldn't help but feel appreciative. She truly was an understanding and considerate girl. Chen Lun had settled for breakfast with 2 bread rolls and a cup of coffee from a cafe downstairs. After crumpling the paper wrapper of the finished rolls, he threw it into a trash bin and walked straight into the bookstore he had visited yesterday. The old man, hearing the sound of the door, was a bit stunned. He probably didn't expect Chen Lun to come over to read books so early in the morning. "Good morning, Tao. Mr. Tao Te." Chen Lun remembered that Mrs. Caroline had called him that yesterday. "Yes, Tao Te." The old man pursed his lips and adjusted his glasses. "Good morning, you lad." After greeting him, the old man pulled out the thick tome he had been reading yesterday from the drawer behind the counter. Chen Lun couldn't be bothered with the impolite old fellow. "Everyone else calls me Mr." He walked to the very back, planning to start reading from there. He had covered the upstairs entirely yesterday and hoped to find something today. Time passed. The sun rose to its zenith and then set into the evening. Sigh. Chen Lun put down the biography he was holding and sighed in resignation. He had flipped through all the books on the first floor, yet he had found nothing. Fortunately, he didn't have to read them thoroughly, just skimming a few pages was enough to know. If no notification box popped up, then it was certainly just an ordinary book. The old man cast a glance at Chen Lun. "Are you looking for a book?" Chen Lun nodded in admission. "Yes." He replied offhandedly, getting ready to leave. Searching for books containing supernatural knowledge was a tricky matter to explain to this old man. However, as he was about to leave, he suddenly shifted his attention to the thick tome in the old man's hand. "Surely it couldn't be this one? Tell me what book you're looking for, I know every single one here like the back of my hand," Tao Te said, with a hint of pride on his face. Seeing his confidence, Chen Lun said, "Do you have any old books that look like they've seen years, or some strange books with mysterious content?" Chen Lun knew well that regular bookstores generally didn't house supernatural knowledge. Even if they did, it was only the very low-tier kind. High-tier supernatural knowledge, if accidentally seen by ordinary people, could lead to the reader's sanity value resetting to 0, causing death or the loss of control that ultimately provoked terrible chaos. Thus, if there really were any high-end supernatural knowledge, it would have been confiscated by the shelter long ago. The bits of supernatural knowledge that lingered among the public were mostly the ones that got away, but these too were limited to low-sequence knowledge. If seen by ordinary people, they wouldn't trigger major incidents of mystical contamination. At most, they would find the books strange and the contents mysteriously unclear. Only those who really understood could extract the mystical supernatural knowledge from them and thus step through the great gate of the transcendence world. No. The old man shook his head decisively. Chen Lun was speechless. Was this old guy messing with me? "Mr. Tao Te, may I take a look at the book you're holding?" "No." The old man refused. "Mr. Tao Te, if I find the book is good, I will pay money for it." Chen Lun looked earnest. Tao Te looked up at him, removing his glasses. "I got this book a few years ago, but the content is all about tomb and mausoleum knowledge. I'm planning to carefully choose and design my future tomb. Just let me have a look. 10 silver ducats." Slap. Chen Lun slapped a gold pound onto the table. "Hey, you really are rich, kid." Tao Te grinned, handing over the thick tome. "You have discovered a mystic book of the Earth faction. Tomb Art Appreciation Collection, progress 4%. By rigorously reading, you have gained 20 experience points. You have discovered complete knowledge of a pathway to becoming transcendent. Earth faction sequence 9, Tomb Robber. Chapter 45. Could it really be a mystic book? Chen Lun felt surprised. At the same time, he had already made up his mind in his heart to get his hands on this book. Although he currently did not have any mysterious substance from the Earth faction to transcribe this supernatural sequence's mystic knowledge, it did not hinder his stockpiling. Once he prepared the materials in the future, he could carry out the transcription. "Mr. Tao Te, are you really not going to sell this book? I've said many times, it's not for sale." The old man grew a bit impatient and extended his hand to signal for Chen Lun to return the book to him. Give me back my money. Chen Lun raised an eyebrow, unwilling to show weakness. The old man was somewhat overcome with anger, blowing his beard and glaring at the young man. We had an agreement, just a look. And you, lad, wouldn't happen to be eyeing a plot of land in Amber City for tomb raiding, would you? The old man looked at Chen Lun with suspicion. Mr. Tao Ti, although you are older than I am, you cannot use that to insult my character. Chen Lun looked disdainful. You should be able to see that I am not so destitute that I need to sustain myself by tomb raiding. The old man didn't take his words to heart and said with a peculiar tone while adjusting his glasses. That's hard to say, you might just be psychologically twisted, simply wanting to satisfy your own desires by desecrating others' graves. Chen Lun could tell that the old man probably wasn't worried about him doing anything bad, but simply didn't want to sell the book to him. Mr. Tao Ti, just tell me straight, what will it take for you to sell the book to me? Chen Lun said bluntly. Until the last resort, he was not willing to use supernatural means to profit. Although the old man was detestable, he himself was not so unfair as to bully the weak and snatch away his belongings. Mr. Tao Ti chuckled twice. I hear you've been dining at Caroline's place? I'd like to taste the dishes she prepares. His expression turned serious right after. You get what I'm saying to you, lad? I get it. Chen Lun nodded, turning and walking out of the bookstore. As the old man started to imagine himself having dinner with Miss Caroline, the door to the bookstore was opened once more. Chen Lun had returned. But this time, he was followed by Mrs. Caroline. Oh, Mr. Tao Ti, I hear you wanted to taste my afternoon tea. Mrs. Caroline held a platter in her hand, filled with a few leftover baked cookies and some crumbs. Unfortunately, this is all that's left. Mr. Tao Ti's face immediately stiffened. But he quickly regained the composure befitting an old gentleman, smoothed his reading glasses, and smiled politely as he took the plate from Mrs. Caroline's hands. Oh, the beautiful Miss Caroline, yes, I'm famished. Then he turned around. The young man had already vanished without a trace with his book. And even the gold coin on the table had mysteriously disappeared. Chen Lun was in a good mood. He held in his hands the Future Home Buyer's Guide belonging to Mr. Tao Ti. For some reason, he could always picture a scene in his mind. A group of players carrying shovels posting on forums, gathering before vanishing into cemeteries late at night. They dug the earth while discussing topics like striking it rich, climbing the ranks, and woohoo, take off. The air was filled with cheer among the graves. The nobility was frustrated, the police officers were under tremendous pressure, and the History and Ritual Association was utterly bewildered. Where did all these shameless rats come from? That's none of my business. Chen Lun whistled a tune and carefully put away the Tomb Art Appreciation Collection. This book could represent a ticket to a supernatural sequence, and with his sub-occupation as a recorder, it was truly a hen that could lay golden eggs. When he reached the third floor, he suddenly heard Connie arguing with her father, Mr. Hood, once again. I need more nectar. Can't you go buy some for me quicker? A feeble yet irritable voice came through. Dad, you really can't take that stuff anymore. I've looked into it, and everyone who has used that drug never ends well. Connie retorted. What do you know, they ended up like that because they didn't continue taking it, you can't stop nectar abruptly. But we're out of money, Dad. Connie's tone was somewhat helpless. If there's no money then go make some. Do you still expect me, an old man, to go out and earn money now? Oh my God, how can you talk to me like this? Connie ran out of the house heartbroken again. She bumped into Chen Lun in the corridor, looking somewhat embarrassed. Chen Lun handed her a handkerchief. Thank you. Connie took it and lowered her head to wipe the corners of her eyes. Connie, take this money and buy medicine for your father. Chen Lun handed her a gold pound. Did you hear all that, Mr. Jack? Connie shook her head and refused, gritting her teeth and saying. I'm not going to give Dad that medicine from the Red Apple Church anymore. Chen Lun sighed silently. Her father's condition was probably beyond salvation. Not to mention the deep affliction by nectar, abruptly stopping might also lead to sudden death within a short time. But this was Connie's family matter, and as an outsider, it wasn't his place to say much. I'm sorry, Mr. Jack, I think I need a walk. Connie's emotions were somewhat downtrodden. Chen Lun stepped aside to let her pass, and Connie walked out in silence. Watching her figure disappear from view, he shook his head slightly and returned to the fourth floor to open the door to his room. Seeing him return, Floey got up from the sofa and handed him a letter. "What's this?" Chen Lun took the letter, puzzled. "Mrs. Caroline sent it, said a strange man gave it to you." Floey explained. Chen Lun already had a hunch it was probably from a lackey of the Iron Fist gang. He took the letter back to his room, sat at the table, and opened it. "Dear Sir, Butler Fedman has sent a message that he will come again tonight. If you need, you can be present in person, and I will cooperate with all your actions. Your humble follower, Gary." Chen Lun crumpled the letter in his hand, rubbed it into scraps, and scattered them in the waste basket. He pondered for a moment. Since Fedman was the butler of Congressman Daniel, he must possess a lot of information. If he could control Fedman, he might gain more insider details. If through him he found out Daniel's intentions, perhaps he could leverage those clues to find Glutton Dolly. Chen Lun wasted no more time. He greeted Floey and left the house again. Using the gradually dimming twilight, Chen Lun concealed his form and hastened towards the swamplands. Before long, he arrived at the entrance of the Flower Bird Tavern again. He pushed the door and entered. The heavily made-up landlady's face changed drastically upon seeing Chen Lun, but then remembered something, and cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She forced a smile and approached. "Sir, Boss Gary is waiting for you in the back courtyard." Chen Lun noticed the vintage intercom in her hands and revealed a polite yet odd smile. "Aren't you going to notify him?" "Don't worry, there won't be any rats causing trouble this time." The landlady suddenly widened her eyes. Chapter 46. The door of the carriage opened, and a middle-aged man in a suit vest stepped out. His hair was meticulously combed back, with a few strands of white adding a touch of mature charm. "Let's go." Fedman covered his nose with his hand, his face set in a grim expression. "Every time I come here, I feel as if I've taken a bath in a cesspool." A hint of disgust flickered in his eyes. Two tall bodyguards in black suits flanked him, descending the steps together. Clang! The door to the Mermaid's Song Tavern was thrown open. The landlady, her face almost brimming with obsequiousness and fawning, approached them, but before she could speak, she was pushed away by the bodyguards. "I've told you many times, keep your distance, lady." He emphasized the word lady with a pause. Fedman didn't even grant her a glance, walking straight and while still holding his nose. The landlady's eyes twitched, and she stepped back, feeling aggrieved. The tavern patrons all stood up to clear a path, taking off their dirty hats and bowing. A few serving maids, carrying trays, watched Fedman carefully, making the charming middle-aged man feel uneasy. He frowned and, accompanied by the two bodyguards, made his way through the kitchen to the backyard. The underlings of the Iron Fist gang seemed to have received notice of an important visitor. About a dozen of them were waiting in the courtyard for Fedman's arrival and saluted in unison upon seeing him. Although some brothers were missing, this was normal for them. The outer city district was chaotic, and the waterside dock was even more so a battlefield of gang violence. The Iron Fist gang, stationed here, was occasionally harassed by other gangs. Deaths in these scuffles were common. The good thing about the waterside dock was that it was never short of people. Many strong young men wanted to join the Iron Fist gang. In the past 2 days, 20 new recruits had been inducted. "Sir, Boss Gary is waiting for you inside," said an elderly member of the Iron Fist gang with respect. He recognized this well-dressed figure who often came to see Boss Gary. Although he didn't know the specifics of their discussions, it was clear that Gary held this man in high esteem. Fedman hummed a monosyllable and entered the building. But when he went in, he found not Gary waiting for him on the sofa. It was a black-haired young man. The other person did not look like a member of a gang, but more like a young student deep in his studies at the academy. Handsome and extremely neat. His demeanor and poise revealed a confidence that was intimately familiar to Fedman. He had seen it in the nobles of the inner city district. The black-haired youth smiled at him politely, with a hint of appraisal in his gaze. Gary stood by his side respectfully, looking every bit the part of a sycophant. "Who might you be, sir?" Fedman's brow furrowed tightly, a bad feeling rising within him. Then, he glanced at Gary again and asked with suppressed anger. "Gary, what is the meaning of this?" The sturdy man did not answer him, standing there like a humble statue. Chen Lun stood up. "Are you the butler of Councilman Daniel? It seems some disloyal dog has told you some things." Fedman let out a cold sneer. But you shouldn't interfere in matters here because that's asking for death, no matter who you are. Chen Lun was too impatient to waste words with him. If this guy wasn't willing to talk, Chen Lun had his ways to make him talk. With a flick of his hand, a flintlock gun appeared in his grasp. He raised his hand, pulling the trigger and firing at the two bodyguards. Bang bang! The lead bullets hit the bodyguards in the arms, piercing through their suit jackets and blossoming into flowers of blood. The bodyguards reacted swiftly. The moment Chen Lun drew his gun, they shielded Fedman with their bodies. They quickly raised their arms and turned, using their arms to protect their heads, thus avoiding being instantly killed by a shot to the head. Chen Lun was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected two ordinary people to be able to react to his speed. After being shot, the two bodyguards grunted and quickly drew their guns, returning fire at Chen Lun. Bang bang! Bang bang bang! Their flintlock guns, like the one in Chen Lun's hand, were products of the Transcendent Workshop with rapid-fire capabilities. The bodyguards, having undergone professional training and likely military veterans, were extremely accurate shooters, and the rapid-fire firearms in their hands were an added advantage. But Chen Lun was faster, darting through the tables and columns like a spirit cat. Not a single lead bullet hit its mark, as they only kicked up clouds of wood and stone dust. In a flash, he was in front of them. A sweeping leg kick. With a whoosh of wind, the complexion of one of the bodyguards changed drastically as he attempted to block with his crossed arms. But it was clearly in vain. It was like being hit by an iron bar as the powerful kick not only shattered his arms but also penetrated through his chest and back. His bones cracked loudly as he screamed and was thrown aside. With several loud bangs, after crashing through a few tables and chairs, that bodyguard was buried under debris and did not move again. Kill, professional bodyguard, high concentration nectar enhancer, awarded 100 experience points. A notification popped up. But Chen Lun paid no attention to it and dodged the incoming dagger with a sidestep. Whoosh! The other bodyguard's face was stern as he launched a continuous ferocious attack on Chen Lun with a short dagger. In the brief pause after the fourth stab, Chen Lun threw a powerful punch. His dark gold fist, covered in carp armor, not only broke the dagger in the bodyguard's hand but also smashed into his abdomen. Spewing out blood, the bodyguard staggered backward a few steps and then fell to his knees. Kill, professional bodyguard, high concentration nectar enhancer, awarded 100 experience points. All of this happened in a few breaths, before the others even had time to react. Damn it! A transcendent! Fedman cursed, turning to run towards the door. Stop him! At that moment, Gary shouted. The remaining members of the Iron Fist gang, unaware of the truth, paused momentarily before rushing to block the entrance. Seeing the way out blocked, Fedman turned around with a gloomy face. Do you know what you're doing? He stared at the slowly approaching young man with black hair and said in a deep voice. Noticing the scales on the back of the young man's hand receding slowly, his eyes twitched. Even if you're a transcendent, you can't kill me. You have no idea what you'll face. By your logic, is Daniel the congressman not the real mastermind then? Chen Lun asked with a polite smile. Spill everything you know. He activated the mermaid's song hypnosis ability and covered Fedman with it. A dark light burst forth from Fedman's arms, neutralizing Chen Lun's psychic influence. Then, a painting flew out from under his vest, unfolding swiftly in midair. Whoosh! The rough oil painting depicted the back view of a long-haired woman, with 4 or 5 vague black spirits swirling around her. Ah! Ah! Fedman screamed. 4 of 5 dark shadows flew out of the painting and entered Fedman through his mouth and nose. The power of the soul. Is this the Moon Faction's Sequence 9 medium? Chen Lun frowned. In just a few seconds, Fedman had turned into a black figure. Covered in shadows and emitting black smoke, he glared at Chen Lun with a fierce look on his face. You troublemaker, you deserve to die. Are you threatening me, Frugnoelo? Chen Lun asked with a polite smile. Chapter 47. Fedman, contrary to his usual behavior, leapt over like a spectre and landed a punch on Chen Lun's face. Chen Lun's head shook slightly. Half of his cheek was covered by carp armor, and one of his eyes turned into a green snake pupil. The young man with black hair revealed a sinister smile even more ferocious than Fedman's. I thought it was some incredible ace up your sleeve, but it turns out it's just a medium. Chen Lun was all too familiar with the Moon Faction's supernatural sequence, as he had followed this path in his previous life. Sequence 9, Medium. Possessing mysterious powers of mediumship, capable of simple communication with the lost souls, and temporarily strengthening oneself by borrowing spirit. This is not your power, but the power recorded by that strange painting. Fedman turned a deaf ear and roared as he threw another punch at Chen Lun. The latter shifted his position and easily dodged the attack. 5 lost souls blessing? That's all there is to it. Die. Fedman lunged forward with a heavy elbow strike. Crack. Chen Lun casually waved his hand and knocked his arm away, causing him to lose balance completely. Not to mention you're just an ordinary man, how much supernatural power can you exert? The young man's indifferent voice reached Fedman's ears. Fedman's eyes widened in disbelief at the outcome. Bang! A blur of a shadow so fast it was almost indistinct crossed his retina. The next second, Fedman felt a severe pain in his abdomen. A step-in kick from Chen Lun sent Fedman flying. He spun in the air, tumbling twice before crashing heavily onto the ground. Ugh! Fedman coughed violently, spitting out a mouthful of blood. 2 dark shadows emerged from his ears and dissipated into nothingness. Damn it! How? How can he be so strong? Fedman was frantic, struggling to get up but failing to do so. If it weren't for the support of the lost souls, that kick would have killed him. An image flashed through his mind, a silhouette glimpsed in the study, conversing with Daniel. Fear and loyalty spread in his heart, eventually erupting. You won't get any information from me, so die. Fedman roared hysterically, eyes blackened as he leaped from the ground. Mid-air, he lunged directly at Chen Lun, face filled with madness as he bellowed. Even if we have to perish together, I will not betray. The black smoke on Fedman's face grew denser, now obscuring his features. His voice emanated from the smoke, low and firm yet twisted and distorted. This guy's lost it. He wants to die with me. A thought flashed through Chen Lun's mind. Immediately, he took decisive action, not wanting to capsize in a gutter. Scorpion tail needle. He rotated and stomped, shattering the air with a kick. Bang! Fedman was sent flying out, over the doorstep of the building, landing on the stairs, unable to rise for the moment due to the supernatural toxin. Fire! Chen Lun signaled, and Gary immediately understood, issuing an order. The underlings of the Iron Fist gang donned their iron gloves and fired their blunderbusses at Fedman. A barrage of crackling and popping shots rang out. Fedman exploded into a grotesque monster, with 3 anguished human faces emerging on his neck and chest. Argh! Nails and shards of glass showered upon him. He howled in agony and eventually ceased struggling. After the dust had settled, Chen Lun walked out of the building. Looking down at the slightly twitching Fedman, he stomped on his head, crushing it. By killing Daniel's butler Fedman, with the lost soul's blessing, you've earned 500 experience points. Ugh! Many of the Iron Fist gang's underlings knelt on the ground, painfully vomiting after witnessing the uncontrollable transformations of the supernaturals. Some of them even rolled on the ground, clutching their heads. Fortunately, Fedman had died quickly. If they had watched for too long, they likely would have all dropped dead. Had a few more undergone mysterious contamination and uncontrollable mutations, it would have spread like a plague, causing an uncontrollable chain reaction. Of course, Chen Lun wouldn't allow such a scenario to unfold, lest he attract the attention of the shelter. Have someone clean up his body, seal it up, and find a place to bury it. Chen Lun was worried that the Iron Fist gang would carelessly throw Fedman's body into a drainage ditch, so he specifically gave this instruction. Yes, Your Excellency. Gary bowed behind him. He had been enhanced with high-concentration fruit honey and had a higher resistance to mysterious contamination, so he wasn't vomiting like his underlings. He just felt some mild discomfort, which he could tolerate. Chen Lun frowned, nudged Fedman's body with the tip of his shoe, and found nothing of value on it. The scroll had also become a useless sheet of white paper. He sighed inwardly, the clue had ended here. But Chen Lun was not discouraged, for he already knew this whole affair involved Counselor Daniel. Now that he had a target, he would eventually clarify things, sooner or later. Finish the 2 tasks I've assigned you as soon as possible. If you encounter trouble you can't handle, notify me just like you did this time. Chen Lun instructed Gary one last time before leaving directly. I shall heed Your Excellency's will. Gary touched his chest and bowed. The next morning, after a simple breakfast, Chen Lun began reading in his room. With the time from last night included, he had almost finished the Tomb Art Appreciation Collection. Around noon. Through careful reading, you have gained 220 experience points. The Earth Faction Mystic Book Tomb Art Appreciation Collection, Progress 100%, has been fully read. You have gained an additional 1 skill point and 1 attribute point. Chen Lun exhaled deeply, having finally exhausted the resources within the book. Although his main profession could only have 1 entry, preventing Chen Lun from inheriting Tomb Robber, he could still gain the corresponding experience through reading. However, since it was not from his own Destiny faction, the gain was halved. The original 1000 experience points were reduced to 500 points. The books in the bookstore downstairs no longer hold any value for exploration. I hope the Iron Fist gang will bring some good news soon, Chen Lun mused. After putting away the Tomb Art Appreciation Collection, Chen Lun planned to go downstairs to Mrs. Caroline's and grab something to eat. As soon as he opened the door, he heard a commotion in the hallway. Rushing to the 3rd floor, he found it crowded with people. Many of the local neighbors were present, and even residents from across the street had come over in considerable numbers. Oh, little Connie, don't blame yourself. Mr. Hood has simply returned to Lady Rose's embrace, Mrs. Caroline consoled, holding Connie in her arms. Connie clung to Mrs. Caroline, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Discover more stories at Empire. Sob sob, it's all my fault, I shouldn't have decided to stop Dad's medicine on my own. It's all because of me, it's my fault. Connie cried, her emotions running high. Chen Lun stood outside the crowd, peering through the half-opened door. He could see into Connie's living room. A man lay motionless on a rocking chair. Connie's father has died. Floey appeared beside Chen Lun, speaking softly. She shook her head slightly and sighed softly. It's because of the withdrawal from fruit honey. Chen Lun nodded to show he was aware. Chapter 48. The dead must be buried on the same day. A taciturn monk from the Moon Church, about 30 years old, stood quietly in the corner of Connie's room, waiting. Mr. Hood had already been placed in a plain coffin, now positioned in the middle of the living room. Mrs. Caroline's flower shop was closed for the day, as she wanted to spend more time with Connie, the poor little girl. At this time, several neighbors on good terms with Mrs. Caroline were sitting on the couch, surrounding Connie in the middle, whispering words of comfort to her. But Connie's spirits were not high, and she responded sporadically. Chen Lun watched them, thinking about certain matters. His future plans lacked a technical talent like Connie, because he needed to establish an organization similar to a shelter's extraordinary workshop that could continuously produce equipment. Whether it was for trading with other powers or for harvesting the wallets of players upon their arrival, it would be very useful. He appreciated Connie's talent and planned to take her with him when he moved to the inner city district. But obviously, now was not the time to speak of such matters. Chen Lun glanced at the Moon Church monk in the corner and turned to whisper to Floey by his side. Take extra care of Connie these next few days. Floey turned her head to gaze at Chen Lun for a few seconds and nodded lightly with pursed lips. Chen Lun seemed to sense a slight sense of grievance in Floey's emotions, and he was momentarily taken aback before realizing his tone was not right. Sorry, I know. Floey's ethereal voice came through. Connie has enough talent in mechanics, she can help you. No, I'm not apologizing for that. Chen Lun smiled at her. My words just now might have given you the wrong impression, and I didn't mean to command you. I don't want you to do things you're reluctant to for my sake. Moreover, you are my greatest support for the future, Floey. Floey looked somewhat surprised, then serious. But I am going to die soon. Chen Lun exhaled deeply, his gaze returning to the living room. I won't let you die. His tone was very calm. Floey's heart trembled, but she felt the weight of his words. This was the second time she heard Chen Lun make a promise to her. Unlike the first time, she had taken it merely as consolation, because the entity within her had told her the chances of survival were slim to none. Perhaps there was a slight chance if she returned to the Red Apple Church, but she preferred death over going back. Hearing these words again, Floey felt an inexplicable sense of relief. For some reason, she actually believed him. Can I really help you? Floey murmured softly, almost inaudibly, as she gazed at the side profile of the dark-haired young man. Time swiftly moved towards evening. The setting sun bathed the entire city in orange-red. The Moon Church monk conveyed to everyone that it was time for the burial. Giving relatives an afternoon to say their farewells was quite humane. Mrs. Caroline and the others stood up, and Connie, with tears in her eyes, expressed her gratitude to the monk. The monks of the Moon Church slowly walked in from outside and carried the coffin away. They were dressed in black robes, with hoods covering their heads, their strong and muscular arms visible from the sleeves. 2 monks easily lifted the coffin and carried it off. The crowd followed the people from the Moon Church to the cemetery. At dusk, the monk recited an elegy for Mr. Hood, as the black-clad neighbors and locals bowed their heads in silence. A funeral is a sacred affair, expressing the living's respect and remembrance for the one who has passed. Death, for people, is a significant process. And in such a world where supernatural existences are commonplace, it's filled with mystery and enigma. The Moon Church handles funeral-related matters in the Empire, dealing with death day in and day out. In his past life, Chen Lun had personally participated in some activities of the Moon Church. His assessment of this church could be summed up in 2 words. Solemn. Unlike the eye-catching Red Apple Church, the Moon Church is rather low-key. Church members, regardless of rank, from top to bottom, all carried a solemn demeanor. They spoke little, as though they regarded themselves as servants of death. Death, after all, is a journey from clamor to silence. The death of one person is but an additional grave to the world, but to those who rely on each other for life, it's as if the entire world has been buried in graves. Miss Connie, please restrain your sorrow. We will all reach the moon after we die, and leaving this world is merely stepping onto the road towards the moon," said the Moon Church's monk in a soft voice. His finger traced an arc in the air, finally touching his own lips with a point. This was the prayer gesture of the Moon Church. Soon after, the monks began to lower the coffin into the grave and used iron shovels to dig up earth to cover it. "I once longed for death, but then I became indifferent." Floey stood beside Chen Lun, watching this scene and murmured softly. Chen Lun glanced at her, offering comfort. "None of what happened in the past was your fault, Floey. The shadows of her childhood and the darkness within the Red Apple Church had nearly destroyed her heart. But I seem to have become more timorous, I now begin to fear death." Floey turned her head, her black satin gaze fixed on him. Chen Lun was startled. He suddenly thought of that countdown. 47 days left. Floey's life had only 47 days left. If they could not find the high-sequence flesh faction mysterious substance within this 1.5 months, then Floey's body would no longer be able to maintain the massive supernatural strength of the great mysterious object's sun-avoiding potted plant. Floey would be inundated by corruption, ultimately extinguishing her personality and losing control, turning into a monster. Chen Lun took a deep breath. "Don't worry, I've already come up with a plan." I believe you." Floey gazed at him for a while, finally nodding and showing a small smile. Experience tales at Empire. It was then that the Moon Church's monk, holding a glass bottle, approached each of the mourners at the funeral. "Please let your sorrow fall and turn into a remembrance for the deceased and a consolation to the living," he said, holding the tear bottle, collecting the tears of the crowd. Perhaps Mr. Hood had not had a good relationship with the neighbors and locals during his lifetime, there were few who shed tears for him. Only Connie cried the most grievously. Lastly, the monk handed the tear bottle to Connie, whispering a few words to her. Connie nodded as she accepted it, expressing her gratitude to the monk. Chen Lun knew what he had said, it was mostly instructions for Connie to place the tear bottle at home. When the tears inside the bottle dried up, it would mean that the departed had reached the moon. But Chen Lun was curious, how could a believer of Rose possibly reach the moon? He couldn't help but shake his head. Chapter 49. Once the crowd had dispersed, Mrs. Caroline invited Connie to dine at her home. Back at number 7 Denton Street, Floey and Mrs. Caroline were busy in the kitchen while Chen Lun and Connie waited in the living room. "Thank you, Mr. Jack." Connie's eyes were somewhat swollen, and she said softly with her head lowered to Chen Lun. "The gold pounds you paid for my father's funeral, I will work hard to repay you. But I'm sorry, right now I may not be able to engage in the research on weapons." Chen Lun picked up his teacup, took a sip, and waved his hand. "Don't be under pressure, Connie, you don't need to hurry to repay me the money." After setting down his teacup, he consoled her. "Research won't suffer from a little delay, what's most important right now is that you take care of yourself, and not let sorrow take control. If you have time, you can go for a walk in the park with Floey to clear your mind." Connie nodded silently and gave Chen Lun a forced smile. The dinner that followed made Connie feel a warmth she had never experienced before. The kind Mrs. Caroline told her many past stories about how she had pulled herself together after losing her husband Henry and son Oliver. Miss Floey encouraged her by her side, and with Mr. Jack sharing some interesting anecdotes, Connie felt her grief lighten a little. The dinner was sumptuous, and it was said that most of it was personally made by Miss Floey, which surprised Connie greatly. The dishes were delicious and healing. What healed her even more was the kindness of people. Late at night, Chen Lun came out from the washroom, heading back to his room to prepare for bed. As he passed by the window, however, he noticed two figures standing under the street lamp across the street. "Hey, buddy, are we just going to wait here?" A man from the Iron Fist gang, smoking a cigarette, said sullenly. "What else? This was a task personally assigned by Boss Gary. And don't forget, the one living here is a non-human entity, let's just complete our mission properly." His companion seemed to remember something, shuddering at the thought. Immediately he stretched out a hand. "Give me one, I've smoked all mine." "Damn it, you always say that." As the two talked, they suddenly saw a dog dart out from the opposite building's hallway. Under the dim glow of the street light, they could just make out its shiny black and white fur. "Woof woof." The dog ran straight up to them, barked twice with its head upturned, and then lifted a front paw and gestured. "The hell? It's like it's talking to me. Give it the letter." "What?" The Iron Fist gang underling suddenly realized his mate was staring up at the building across the street. He followed the gaze in that direction and vaguely saw a dark-haired young man watching them from the fourth-floor window. "Give it the letter." His companion urged him again. It took a moment for the man in the leather jacket to come back to his senses, trembling as he handed the letter he had in his embrace to the dog. The dog took the letter in its mouth, gave him a disdainful look, and then slunk back into the hallway without a backward glance. The Iron Fist gang underling stood dumbfounded for a while until the cigarette burned his mouth, snapping him out of it. Truly bizarre. "I've just been snubbed by a dog." The border collie returned to the room, and Chen Lun took the letter, petting its head. The dog happily wagged its tail. Experience exclusive tales on Empire. Tearing open the envelope, he inspected the contents in the moonlight. "Respected sir, I have gathered information about the recent situation of Viscount Pompey as per your instructions. He often went out to meet friends and attend various large events and venues, and occasionally went to the artificial forests in the inner city district to hunt. Beyond that, he mostly stayed on his estate and read books. There's another piece of news. This information comes from a good friend of Viscount Pompey, Baron Barney, and its authenticity is very high. It's said that Viscount Pompey's daughter, Miss Rebecca, fell off a horse and injured her leg and is currently recuperating at home. He is very distressed and wants to find a private tutor for Miss Rebecca. Here is the detailed address of Viscount Pompey's home, number 9, 2nd Avenue, Inner City District, Pompey Manor. Additionally, regarding this person Dolly you mentioned, no clues have been found so far. I hope you can forgive my incompetence. I and the Iron Fist gang will do our utmost to search for his whereabouts for your sake. Your humble follower, Gary." Chen Lun read the letter, crumpled it up, and destroyed it. He leaned back in his chair, finding a comfortable position. His eyelids drooped as he pondered. A moment later, he struck a match, and lit the oil lamp on his table. Then he picked up a feather quill and, dipping it into ink, wrote another letter. The content of the letter requested Gary to create a fictitious identity for him and Floey. Although it was to be fabricated, the identity had to be legitimate, capable of withstanding scrutiny from the security office of the inner city district. This wouldn't be too difficult for Gary, given his connections with many influential figures in the inner city district. It was akin to fabricating the identities of two individuals, followed by registering them at the security office. Chen Lun specified his own identity as a scholar from out of town, whose research focus was literature and nature. One of his plans was to apply for a job as the private tutor of Viscount Pompey's daughter, thus infiltrating Viscount Manor before opportunely searching for the Phillips legacy. However, this was just a backup plan. If there were a simpler way to infiltrate and directly snatch the item, all the better. As for Floey's identity, Chen Lun had Gary fabricate the title of an impoverished noble from out of town and apply it to her. While nobility was rare, when considered across the entire Tressa Empire, it was a vast group. An obscure noble's title, especially from out of town, would be difficult for someone to verify its authenticity. As long as Floey didn't often attend noble gatherings and large events, and her behavior and dress fit her identity, she was unlikely to be exposed. In fact, Chen Lun wasn't worried about this at all. With Floey's looks and demeanor, even if she were dressed as a maid, she wouldn't be able to hide her unique charm. Chen Lun put the letter he'd written into a brand new envelope. He looked down from upstairs and saw that the 2 Iron Fist gang members had already left. He felt a bit helpless and was fretting when he caught sight of the dog at his feet, still wagging its tail and looking at him. You really are a good dog. Woof. Dog. What? 2 members of the Iron Fist gang walked down the quiet street when one of them suddenly exclaimed. Looking back, they saw the familiar dog charging towards them. It's that again. Why is it chasing us? Could it be that his lordship is dissatisfied with us and wants to have it chew us to death? The 2 looked at each other. Run! 2 men in leather jackets sprint for their lives down the street, with a large black and white dog hot on their heels. Until one stumbled over rubbish on the ground. When he looked up, his companion was already far away, leaving only a receding figure. Damn it! The fallen guy cursed, enduring the pain. Am I going to die? Oh my goodness, I'm still so young, I haven't even touched the hand of a maid from the Flower Bird Tavern, I haven't. The dog, too, was panting heavily, having run up to him. The Iron Fist gang member had closed his eyes to await death, but no pain came after a long while. Slightly opening his eyes, he saw a dog face staring at him, a letter in its mouth. Most importantly, its eyes seemed to regard him as if he were an idiot. Sieti. To think I'd be looked down upon by the same dog twice in one day. Chapter 50. Gary from the Iron Fist gang had brought Chen Lun what he desired. 2 sets of identity documents and the corresponding tokens. The identity document was a newly inked card, encased in a thin leather wallet. Chen Lun opened it to see that on his identity card, the name column read Jack Spett. His status, as he had requested, was an out-of-town scholar from Peacock City in Bronze City, Rock State. Continue reading at Empire. The other document, a diploma, noted his studies at Oakwood Academy, with a focus on literature, history, and nature. These proofs bore the seal of the Amber City Inner City District Security Office and the signatures of the reviewing officials. Nicely done. Chen Lun praised satisfactorily. After breakfast, Chen Lun casually handed Floey her identity documents along with a copper badge. What's this? Floey asked curiously. Necessities for us to move around in the inner city district. Chen Lun explained with a smile. Keep them safe, and if we're inspected, just show them. Remember, you're no longer a nun from the Red Apple Church, but a lady from a declining noble family from out of town, Floey Wolf. Upon hearing this, Floey instantly realized that the items in her hand were fabricated identities. Are we preparing to leave this place? To the inner city district. She nodded and asked softly. Her fingers gently traced the pattern on the copper badge, and the name of a family surfaced in her mind. Wolf. This noble family from out of town's ancestors didn't matter anymore, likely there were no descendants left. With this name, Floey could live securely in the inner city district. Yes, we should be leaving in the next couple of days. Chen Lun answered softly. Floey suddenly felt a hint of reluctance. Although she had only lived at number 7 on Denton Street for about a week, she had grown somewhat fond of the place. Don't worry, we'll have the chance to come back and visit Mrs. Caroline. Chen Lun said as he ruffled the back neck fur of the border collie, which looked confusedly at him. And you don't need to worry about Mrs. Caroline being lonely by herself, I plan to leave this guy here. Woof. The dog spun around in place, visibly reluctant. Chen Lun simply ignored it. He did not know the situation in the inner city district yet, and taking Floey with him was already a stretch on his resources. If Connie ultimately agreed to go with them, they would need to be even more cautious. It was better to leave the dog here to keep Mrs. Caroline company, at least providing it with a shelter, so it didn't have to roam any longer. Knock, knock. Just then, someone knocked on the front door. Chen Lun went to open it, and Connie stood outside with a smile on her face. Mr. Jack, I've finished modifying the firearm. Chen Lun raised an eyebrow, surprised at her efficiency. Seeing the undeniable fatigue on her face and the bandages on her fingertips, Chen Lun guessed that she must have been fully engrossed in her research these past couple of days. Perhaps it was also a way for her to forget her pain. Connie took a seat on the sofa and placed the modified blunderbuss on the table. With my design, its stability has greatly increased, and it's unlikely to misfire anymore. Chen Lun picked up the blunderbuss to inspect it. Raging Fire custom-made firearm, improved version. Item description: a carefully modified flintlock gun with clever design enhancements to improve stability without any reduction in firepower. The expanded muzzle allows for formidable lethality at close range with no restrictions on the type of ammunition used. A small steel ball can be shot with such force that it makes you cry in pain. An excellent modification. I didn't misjudge you, Connie. Chen Lun put down the blunderbuss and smiled as he complimented her. Connie blushed and hesitantly picked up the mechanical glove again. Looking at it, her tone carried a hint of discouragement. I designed several plans for this mechanical glove, but none of them worked. I tried adding some functions to it, but that didn't seem right either. Instead, it became impractical. Chen Lun knew that the glove was actually a failed imitation, crafted by the craftsmen of the Iron Fist gang by copying the design of another. Lacking the true soul. He looked at Connie, not wanting to dampen her enthusiasm, so he took out the Mad Hand prototype drawing palm fireworks. Connie was extremely surprised when she saw the exquisite painting. This painting, so this is what it's like. She seemed very excited, pointing at the mechanical glove in the painting. This weapon is forged in imitation of the glove in the painting, but the forger got it wrong. It shouldn't be like that. Its structure may be complex, but its function should be simple, related to fire. I feel flame, light, and change from it. Connie stared at the painting, completely absorbed. As if the patterns on it were revealing answers to her, speaking of secrets that were felt rather than said. Chen Lun did not disturb her, quietly sipping his tea. Noon arrived. Suddenly, Connie felt the painting in her hands wasn't just a sheet of paper, but a piece of red-hot iron. Her palm grew warm and the painting subsequently landed on the table. She felt a bit dizzy and nauseous, and began to feel an overall sense of heat. Don't look at it anymore, have a cup of tea and rest. Chen Lun said softly. He knew that Connie's discomfort was due to staring for a long time at an item that possessed extraordinary powers, causing her sanity value to decrease and her body to react adversely. Connie reluctantly nodded, choosing to heed Mr. Jack's advice and shifting her gaze away from the painting. Mr. Jack, if I could observe that painting frequently, I'm confident I could forge the mechanical glove depicted on it. Connie took a sip of the tea, saying firmly. She then added. It will be completely different from this kind of mechanical glove. Connie gestured towards the mad hand on the table. Chen Lun nodded, seeing that Connie truly understood the drawing. He also grew more eager to recruit this talented individual. Don't look at the painting for too long, it could harm you. He cautioned. Connie had already sensed that the painting had a kind of magic power that mysteriously conveyed extensive knowledge about mechanical forging. But at the same time, it contained a threat, giving her a constant sense of danger, as if her hair were standing on end. Connie, what are your plans for the future? After resting a while, Chen Lun casually asked. Connie looked at the teacup in her hands and was silent for a moment. I plan to repay your money and then move to the Technical Academy to study knowledge in peace. Are you interested in coming with me to the inner city district? Chen Lun inquired tentatively. Connie looked up in surprise. I have high hopes for your talent, Connie. Just so you know, I might need an excellent assistant like you in the future to complete my plans. If you are willing to go with us to the inner city district, I can sponsor your studies at a better academy, and you won't have to worry about the expenses for research either. Chen Lun offered Connie the invitation earnestly. Connie's eyes widened. After musing for a moment, she fidgeted with her small hands. Thank you for your esteem, Mr. Jack. But I know my skills are still far from adequate. May I have some time to consider your offer? Connie was tempted, but she did not immediately give a reply. Chen Lun nodded in understanding. Floey and I may be leaving in a couple of days. Take your time to think about it. Chapter 51. Under the purple moon, the outer city district was engulfed in darkness and silence. In contrast with the distant inner city district, this place seemed more like a stagnant pool of water at the moment. Separated by a wide river, one could vaguely see many tall buildings in the inner city district in the distance. Their lights were brilliant, like stars in the night sky. Reflected on the ink-black river were rivers of stars, the all-night revelry of the wealthy. If one looked long enough, it seemed as if one could hear the clinking of wine glasses and loud laughter coming from over there. Chen Lun had been standing behind a tree by the river for quite some time, observing a grand bridge through the railing. The bridge was manned with checkpoints, 5 people per team, with several teams on rotation. By crossing this bridge, one can enter the inner city district from the outer city district. Read exclusive content at Empire. Chen Lun thought to himself. He had come here under the cover of night, intending to scout out the situation in the inner city district in advance and prepare for the upcoming plan. The separation between the inner and outer city was quite rigid. To prevent people from crossing the river, railings 5 to 6 meters high had even been erected on both banks. The metal railings, coated in black paint and spaced narrowly apart, were no wider than a palm, and their tops were as sharp as lance points. Anyone attempting to climb over the railing would risk disembowelment if they were not careful. Moreover, on the surface of Amber River and along the shore of the inner city district, police officers and guardians patrolled in intersecting routes, leaving virtually no blind spots. This was probably due to the chaos of the outer city district. The inner city district was home to those at the upper echelons of power and money. If free passage were allowed between the two areas, it could pose a danger to the residents of the inner city district. The more noble a person was, the more they feared interacting with the lower classes. The clear division that Amber City has formed today owes much to the influence of the elites on the council. This is indeed strict. Chen Lun sighed. Infiltration seemed difficult under such conditions. But he did not need to infiltrate. Luckily, I already have an identity proof, at most I'll just be questioned. After a brief pause, Chen Lun moved quickly, like a swiftly gliding ghost, and disappeared from his spot. In front of the bridge checkpoint, two guardians who had just finished inspecting a merchant caravan's carriage were standing idly, and soon they saw a tall figure of a man approaching slowly. Sorry, please present your identity proof. One guardian, with a short sword slung at his waist, stretched out a gloved hand. Chen Lun handed over a small leather booklet. The guardian opened the identity proof to check it, scrutinizing the black-haired young man in front of him under the light of the street lamps on both sides. Seeing the well-dressed man holding a book, just as described in the identity proof, the guardian handed back the identity proof and touched his left chest with his right hand in a salute. Mr. Jack, may the sun shine upon you. He gestured with an open hand and then stepped aside to let him pass. Chen Lun nodded his head and walked straight onto the bridge under the watchful eyes of several guardians. Walking on the bridge and overlooking the river on one side, he couldn't help but feel a sense of reflection. Indeed, as he had expected, it would be extremely difficult to navigate the inner city district without an identity proof, let alone get past this checkpoint. Once he really entered the inner city district, the first thing to do was to find a fixed residence to avoid being frequently questioned. After crossing the bridge, Chen Lun arrived at an exceptionally wide street. The view was quite astounding. The streets were paved uniformly with grayish-blue stone bricks, with tall and orderly buildings on both sides. Most of those buildings appeared to be various shops, among which Chen Lun also found a branch of the Silver Dragon Trade Association. Unlike the outer city district, electricity was widely used here, as if there were two completely different systems operating on their own. Colorful signs gleamed in the night, with carriages and well-dressed pedestrians weaving through the streets. In a daze, Chen Lun seemed to see the shadow of his previous life. He walked along, following street signs to Viscount Manor located on 2nd Street. Fashionably dressed women in groups were often seen on the streets. Some would even turn their heads to wink at Chen Lun, then leave with a giggle. If at that moment Chen Lun approached them with his magnetic voice and said, "Beautiful miss, please give me the chance to invite you for a coffee," then the likelihood of these women providing their contact information would probably be 100%. But he had no time to flirt. After taking nearly 2 hours and detours, Chen Lun finally found 2nd Street. And by that time, it was already deep into the night. The inner city district is situated on elevated terrain, and it gets higher the further you venture inward. Gazing out from over the railing here, one could see the broad Amber River and the pitch-black expanse of the outer city district. Number 9, 2nd Street, Pompey Manor. He had arrived at the perimeter of a vast estate. The rustling sound of the wind stirred the lush trees within the manor, casting dancing shadows that swayed gently. Peering through the elaborate floral black railings, one could vaguely make out a lawn and, in its deepest reaches, several villas with lights shining brightly. Walking around the perimeter fence, Chen Lun mentally estimated the area's size. So large, how shall I search? Chen Lun couldn't help frowning. As he was pondering, suddenly his expression changed, and he quickly hid behind a tree, concealed in the shadows. The sound of footsteps followed soon after, as two security officers with lanterns in hand, and a big dog on a leash, passed by. Lately, the order from above has been to extend our patrols, one sighed. I was hoping to spend more time at home with my daughter. Can't be helped, Just endure it, buddy. After the incident at the Garden Restaurant, even the son of Congressman Lawson died there, so strengthening security is inevitable. The two officers chatted idly, with one of them complaining. Those damn extremists, to commit such a heinous act. You believe the explanation from the higher-ups? Forget it, I saw investigators from that secret department at the scene, this was most likely not the work of ordinary people. As they gradually walked away, the big dog at their feet seemed to detect something and stood still, refusing to move. It stared intently at where Chen Lun was hiding, and let out a soft, low growl. The officer noticed the tension in the leash and also became aware of the dog's abnormal reaction. What's wrong, Charlie? Following the direction of the dog's gaze, the two officers looked toward a tree outside the fences of Pompey Manor. Years of experience told them something was off in the shadows behind the tree. They exchanged glances and, as if on cue, pulled out their batons, moving in a pinching motion and slowly approached Chen Lun. One of them even put a whistle to his lips, ready to blow it at any moment to call for backup from nearby officers. Chen Lun's heart tightened. He didn't want to be discovered, as it would disrupt his plans. His index finger glowed faintly, and he beckoned to the big dog. The dog sprang free from its leash and raced over to Chen Lun, passing the officers. Charlie. Before they could react, the dog named Charlie ran back to their feet. Wagging its tail, it presented a silver ducat it had held in its mouth. Hey, a silver ducat? Haha, what a good boy. Since when did Charlie learn to pick up money? Buddy, I think we might get rich off of him. The two officers breathed a sigh of relief, kidding with each other for a few moments before leaving with the dog. The big dog looked back and saw a thumbs up emerging from behind the shadow of the tree. Its tail wagged even more energetically. After the officers had gone, Chen Lun stepped out from behind the tree. It seems I was too optimistic. He glanced at Viscount Manor beside him, musing to himself. His original plan was to find an opportunity to sneak in, locate Philip's legacy, and leave. But now, the plan seemed rather unrealistic. Pompey Manor was too large, even if he used animals to search inside, it would take a considerable amount of time. And he couldn't afford to be seen frequently in this area, as it would raise suspicions. Better use the alternative plan, infiltrate the manor first, then look for a chance to search. Having made up his mind, Chen Lun prepared to leave. As he passed by the great gate of Pompey Manor, two middle-aged maids happened to come out from inside. They carried several parcels, apparently preparing to go out. Miss Rebecca has been so temperamental lately, it's such a headache. No worries, the Viscount has already found a candidate for a family tutor, it seems to be a professor from the Iris Academy, who will be coming over in a few days. Then Miss Rebecca won't be so idle, always teasing us for fun. Chen Lun walked past them with an unchanged expression, but his heart sank. Someone was chosen? Was the alternative route blocked too? Chapter 52. Mrs. Caroline stood at the entrance of her flower shop, saying with a look of reluctance. Yes, Mrs. Caroline. Chen Lun nodded. He was holding a suitcase, and Floey, in a black dress, stood quietly by his side. Today, she wore a black cloche hat, her pale gold hair cascading down like a waterfall from behind the hat. It's such a shame. Mr. Kent left without a word, the Moriarty siblings moved away, and now you two are also heading to the inner city district. The whole building will become empty. Mrs. Caroline was quite upset. Just then, a striking figure came running down the stairs. Mr. Jack. Miss Floey. Please wait for me. Connie, carrying bags big and small, ran over, panting. Bang. She set down her luggage heavily and looked up. Mr. Jack, I've made up my mind, I want to go with you. She pursed her lips, a bit embarrassed. A smattering of freckles adorned her flushed cheeks, making her whole face resemble a strawberry. Chen Lun looked at her and couldn't help but laugh. Partly because Connie had chosen to accept the olive branch he had extended, and partly because her current appearance was quite charming. It looks like you've made up your mind, Connie. Yes, Mr. Jack. Connie nodded emphatically, then flashed a brilliant smile. Chen Lun extended his hand. Welcome to my team. Thank you for your trust, I'll work hard. Connie reached out her little hand, and they shook hands warmly. Mrs. Caroline was surprised, speechless at the sight of the three. After a while, she shook her head slightly. It seems I was wrong, even Connie is leaving. Now it really will be just this old lady left. Your next read is at Empire. Then she looked down at her border collie, somewhat amused. You're not leaving too, are you? Babu. Chen Lun had named the dog Babu, and, hearing Mrs. Caroline's words, it seemed quite eager to try. But before it could take a step, it was intimidated back into its place by Chen Lun's stern gaze, obediently crouching at Mrs. Caroline's feet. It wagged its tail and even nuzzled her hand, allowing her to stroke it. Oh, good boy. Mrs. Caroline was pleased. Clearly, there was one who did not want to leave. Connie hid on the side, covering her mouth to stifle a giggle, and Floey couldn't help but smile as well. Mrs. Caroline, we must be going, but we'll come back to visit number 7 Denton Street when we can. All right, little Jack. Oh wait, just a moment. Mrs. Caroline seemed to recall something and dashed upstairs. After a short while, she came running down with a notebook in hand. This is a cooking manual I wrote myself. Every time I cooked for Henry and Oliver, I would note down some insights. They always praised my cooking, and over time, this notebook became full. Now I'm giving it to you, little Floey, hoping it can help you. Mrs. Caroline said as she handed it to Floey. Thank you, Mrs. Caroline. Floey accepted the notebook, and discreetly turned her head, glancing at Chen Lun. I will study it well. Inner City District. Number 45 on 1st Avenue. Daniel's apartment. In the study, a middle-aged man paced back and forth. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. He took a cigar from the box on the desk, cut it open, lit it, and took a deep inhale. As the smoke filled the room, his repressed, low voice rose. Fedman went without returning. The Iron Fist gang dare not make a move. Was it the work of other gangs from the outer city district? His face was as still as water, his gaze deep and distant. To take out 2 elite bodyguards together, it can't be just any ordinary force. Daniel gloomily slid open the French windows, and a light rain began to fall outside. The rain pattered on the lawn of the garden, splashing up droplets of water. Whoosh! He exhaled another puff of smoke. Damn! My butler has vanished off the face of the earth. How are things supposed to continue? It felt as if there was a lump in his chest, and he had no idea how to vent it. Just then, a painting hanging on the wall of the study eerily came to life. It depicted a large mouth with irregular teeth, some square, some round, very abstract. 5 tongues stretched out from the mouth, each varying in thickness and length. The background was a kaleidoscope of swirling colors, which at first glance caused dizziness and disorientation. Daniel. The large mouth in the painting opened and closed, speaking in human language. Hearing his name called, Senator Daniel's face changed color, and he hastily discarded his cigar, closing the French windows. Snap! Your Lordship, the painted gentleman. He approached the painting, speaking with respect. How goes the research on the item? Research? Daniel clenched his teeth, looked up at the painting, and instantly felt a splitting headache. He quickly averted his gaze, looking down as he spoke. There was progress, but my butler Fedman has disappeared after going to the outer city district. I still don't know the situation with the craftsman. The large mouth in the painting closed slightly, the corners turning up in a sinister smile. Then it emitted a spine-chilling snicker. After a moment, I can choose someone else, Daniel, said the large mouth in the painting. Upon hearing that, Daniel's heart skipped a beat. I've dealt with your enemy for you, that Senator Lawson? He is currently consumed by the pain of losing his son and might act recklessly. If I turn and back him, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to assist me, willing to pay any price. Daniel's courage faltered, and he involuntarily swallowed his saliva. He let out a long breath, surreptitiously wiping the sweat from his forehead. No, painted gentleman, Lawson can't help you. He has no foundation in the outer city district. He can't organize the manpower needed to forge that weapon for you. Oh! The large mouth in the painting paused. But it seems you have also lost the ability to serve me. Assistance is mutual, Daniel, you can't keep dragging your feet and not delivering what I want. Just give me a little more time. Your Lordship, the painted gentleman. Senator Daniel clenched his fists. He took a deep breath and straightened up. I will dispatch new personnel as soon as possible to complete your commission. Very well, I'll give you another half a month's time. But the amount of money owed next time, I'll need double, as compensation for your breach of trust. Senator Daniel kept a stoic face, squeezing a single word from his throat. Fine. The colors on the painting twisted, the large mouth slowly closed, the disordered tongues and uneven teeth retracted. Eventually, the painting stilled, no longer changing. Senator Daniel, veins bulging on his forehead, left the study without a word. In a painting studio at the other end of the inner city district, a young man suddenly lifted his head, staring at a painting on the wall. The hand in the painting, bizarre with 7 fingers, began to move. One of the fingers extended, its sharp nail writing within the painting. The nail, like a knife, traced over the flesh of the canvas, inscribing a line in blood. After half a month, assassinate Senator Daniel. Chapter 53. Number 9 on 2nd Street, Pompey Manor. The early morning sunlight was full of vitality, seemingly illuminating the entire world and brimming with energy. The great gate of the manor emitted a long creaking sound as it was pulled open from the inside. 4 or 5 maids worked together to swing the gate wide open and secure it, while an elderly man resembling a butler stepped out. He raised his hand, clad in a white glove, to adjust his deep blue cravat at his chest, then waved to the maids. Professor Ulysses will be here shortly, don't disgrace the Viscount, he said. Yes, Mr. Binos, they replied. The old butler stood erect, hands crossed in front of him, standing by the gate, quietly awaiting the arrival of the distinguished guest. 2nd Street was located at the heart of the inner city district, where the residents were either rich or noble. Consequently, the nearby environment was considerably pleasant, with both greenery and layout giving a sense of comfort and luxury. Compared to other parts of the inner city district, the buildings here were more aesthetically pleasing and grandiose. The structures were spaced widely apart, providing a broad view that was refreshing to the spirit. Moreover, the elevated terrain allowed for a distant view of the entire Ember City, enticing many middle-class families to use their leisure time for strolls in the area with their loved ones. Viscount Pompey was a low-key person, not well known by the general populace of the inner city district. Pompey Manor had stood on 2nd Street for many years, yet few people knew what went on inside. Hey, look over there, said someone. A group of young women dressed in light yellow shirts and brown skirts passed by. They were students from the nearby Laburnum Girls' School, each carrying a regulation satchel. One of them pointed at the entrance to Pompey Manor, drawing the attention of her companions. Is Viscount Pompey expecting a visitor? One of them asked. Oh, have you forgotten about Miss Rebecca in the 2nd year? She ignored the advice on the excursion and hurt her leg riding a horse. I overheard my mother and her friends talking, and Viscount Pompey has found her an excellent tutor, who is said to be a scholar from a public academy, another whispered. Another student displayed an expression of surprise and recognition, saying softly. No wonder Mrs. Megan has been in a foul mood during classes lately, it's probably because she wasn't asked. Giggle. The girls covered their mouths and laughed. At this moment, a carriage rolled to a stop at the entrance of Pompey Manor. The coachman, wearing a tall top hat, disembarked and lifted the curtain of the carriage. A middle-aged woman of distinguished attire stepped down, her head adorned with a wide-brimmed hat. Oh, it's Lady Ulysses! The students exclaimed in surprise. I know her, she's a professor at the Iris Academy and author of the Elk Poetry Collection. I've also read that book, it's simply marvelous. The students conversed in hushed tones. Miss Rebecca is so lucky to be educated by Lady Ulysses. Well, her father is Viscount Pompey after all. When Mr. Binos, the old butler, saw the middle-aged woman descend from the carriage, he confidently strode forward with his chest puffed out. Lady Ulysses, he greeted her. He saw her removing her gloves, readying for a hand-kissing greeting. Unexpectedly, the lady turned and lifted the carriage curtain again, and under the gaze of all present, a tall and handsome young man emerged. Dressed in a black suit with a felt cape over his shoulders and a black top hat on his head. He slowly stepped down from the carriage, taking a moment to look around. Upon seeing the group of female students, he gave them a polite smile. Oh! My goodness! Who is that gentleman? He's so handsome! Suddenly, Mr. Binos, the butler, was taken aback. He did not know who this young man was, arriving with Lady Ulysses in the same carriage. Immediately afterward, Mr. Binos felt a weight on his hand and looked down to find Lady Ulysses had already extended her hand to him. May the sun shine upon you, my lady, he said. He kissed the back of his fingers and blessed her. After Mrs. Ulysses had put her gloves back on, Binos looked at her with puzzlement. May I ask who this is? "Oh, this is my good friend, Mr. Jack." Mrs. Yulai introduced to Binos. The old butler nodded, shook hands with Chen Lun, and greeted him warmly. "But, Mrs. Yulai, Viscount Pompey invited you alone to dine today," Binos said politely, pausing especially on the word alone. He suspected that this groomed young pretty face must be Mrs. Yulai's love interest. Yet from what he knew, it was unlike Mrs. Yulai to be so impolite. It was very probable that this pretty face, upon hearing of her invitation from Viscount Pompey, had the audacity to tag along uninvited. There was no shortage of people from the inner city district wanting to ingratiate themselves with Viscount Pompey. "Oh, I believe Viscount Pompey wouldn't mind," Mrs. Yulai said with a smile. Binos felt displeased and cast a glance at the young man with black hair, without showing his feelings. The latter, however, keenly noticed his gaze and returned a polite smile. "Mrs. Yulai, surely you understand the reason Viscount Pompey has invited you?" "Yes, I am well aware." Mrs. Yulai cut off Binos' words, promptly made an apologetic gesture, and added. "Mr. Jack is here for this reason. I have been unwell recently and may not be able to continue as Miss Rebecca's tutor, but I recommend him." "Him? This gentleman?" Binos looked incredulous. Setting aside the fact that he had never seen this young man before or heard of any academic achievements to his name, his appearance and age did not seem to fit that of a distinguished scholar. Even with Mrs. Yulai's recommendation, the Viscount would certainly not agree. "I shall explain the matter personally to Viscount Pompey, Mr. Binos," Mrs. Yulai whispered. The old butler was silent for a moment and finally nodded. "Follow me, both of you." He and a few maids led the way, guiding Mrs. Yulai and Chen Lun into the manor. The path stretched deep into the estate, with broad lawns on either side much like a prairie, covering a large area. Chen Lun looked around with interest as he walked. He had found out about Mrs. Yulai's whereabouts in advance from the clues at the Iris College and waited at her doorstep until he managed to board the carriage using the hypnosis capabilities of Mermaid's Song. The effort had taken a considerable toll on him. To save time, he had frequently used the hypnosis necklace, which by now had depleted over half of his sanity value. Bearing the dull ache in his head, Chen Lun let out a silent breath. "I have finally made it inside. Now the task is to persuade Viscount Pompey to accept me as his daughter's tutor. If needs be, I shall resort to Mermaid's Song." But he had a feeling that this matter was not going to be straightforward. The manor was vast, and it took Binos and the two others more than 10 minutes to arrive at the villa entrance. "The Viscount and Lady Pompey, as well as Miss Rebecca, are waiting inside." He pushed open the brown wood in the great gate and gestured for them to enter. "Please come in." "Thank you." Mrs. Yulai nodded in thanks, adjusted her wide-brimmed hat, and walked in. Chen Lun followed closely behind her, nodding to Binos in acknowledgement as he passed by. The old butler watched the young man expressionlessly, yet he was thinking about the scene of him being sent away by Viscount Pompey shortly. Another daydreamer, he thought. Chapter 54. The living room on the first floor of the villa was very spacious. The decorations inside were also extremely luxurious. A middle-aged blonde man with a mustache rose from the sofa. He approached Mrs. Yulai, elegantly took her hand, and kissed the back of her fingers. At this moment, two females, one older and one younger, came over. They were Mrs. Pompey and her daughter, Rebecca. Rebecca was sitting in a wheelchair, pushed by Mrs. Pompey. "Mrs. Yulai, good morning." They greeted Mrs. Yulai with a friendly kiss on the cheek. "Good morning, esteemed Viscount Pompey, the beautiful Mrs. Pompey, and the lovely Miss Rebecca," Mrs. Yulai politely responded. Viscount Pompey turned and glanced at the young man beside her. "Who might this be?" "Oh, Viscount, this is Mr. Jack, a good friend of mine." Mrs. Yulai began introducing him to Viscount Pompey. During this time, Rebecca in her wheelchair was secretly sizing up Chen Lun. "He's really handsome," she thought to herself, blinking her moist eyes while her long eyelashes fluttered. "More handsome than the other young nobles." After a brief introduction by Mrs. Yulai, Viscount Pompey nodded lightly. "It's a pleasure to have you visit Pompey Manor, Mr. Jack." He extended his hand as he spoke. The voice of Viscount Pompey was very calm, without affectation or any warmth. "Since you are a friend of Mrs. Yulai, you must join us for breakfast shortly." "It is my honor, Viscount." Chen Lun shook his hand, showing a polite smile. But a hint of gravity flashed in his eyes momentarily. Untraceably, he glanced at a ring on the Viscount's ring finger. Viscount Pompey nodded, quickly released the handshake, and signaled to the butler, "By nose. Shall we talk over breakfast then?" "As the host wishes, Viscount." Old butler Binos got the hint, and called upon the maids to prepare breakfast. Some maids went to the kitchen to inform the cook, while others began setting up the dining room. Everything was organized smoothly. As everyone took their seats, and before the dishes were served, Mrs. Pompey spoke up. "Mrs. Hewlett, Rebecca's education for the next few months will be entrusted to you." "I haven't yet had the chance to explain, Mrs. Pompey." Mrs. Hewlett had already taken off her wide-brimmed hat, handing it to a maid. She adjusted her coiffed hair, and her expression was apologetic. "Please forgive me, my body hasn't been feeling well lately, I'm afraid I might not be up to the task." Mrs. Pompey and the Viscount looked at each other, a trace of confusion visible on their faces. If that were really the case, Mrs. Hewlett wouldn't have accepted the invitation. Viscount Pompey frowned slightly. As far as he knew, Mrs. Hewlett was in good health. The current excuse clearly seemed contrived. "For this reason, I have found Mr. Jack. He is not only a good friend but also a scholar I admire. Mr. Jack has only recently arrived in Amber City, but his capabilities are beyond doubt," Mrs. Hewlett said, smiling. "He happens to excel in literature, history, and nature, making him an excellent choice for Miss Rebecca's tutor." Upon hearing her words, Rebecca's eyes lit up. But both Viscount Pompey and his wife's expressions darkened simultaneously. The Viscount eyed the young man beside the dining table and said bluntly, "I have met many young people who are eloquent and can talk about anything, yet are idiots when it comes to taking action." His words were hardly diplomatic, and both Lady Eulife and Chen Lun sensed the distrust in them. "I don't think this is appropriate, Lady Eulife." Lady Pompey did not distrust Chen Lun's talents, rather, she was concerned that he was a young man. If he were to become Rebecca's private tutor, it might endanger her daughter's reputation. Moreover, his handsome appearance was a dangerous signal for Rebecca. Facing the resistance from Viscount Pompey and his wife, Chen Lun's expression remained unchanged, still smiling. He glanced at the diamond-encrusted gold ring on Viscount Pompey's hand. "That ring, it's a mysterious object classed as a spiritual protector, now this is troublesome." Unable to use Mermaid's song for hypnosis, convincing Viscount Pompey solely based on eloquence would be very difficult. While he was quietly pondering his strategy, Rebecca suddenly spoke. "Let's give this gentleman a chance, Mom and Dad." Seated gracefully, she coquettishly tugged at Lady Pompey's arm. "I really long to learn, staying at home is so boring." "But, Rebecca..." Lady Pompey showed a hint of difficulty. But as she looked at her daughter's lovely face and pitiable expression, she finally relented. "All right, let's give this gentleman a chance." She looked at her husband, who grimaced in response. Just then, the maid came in with breakfast, and the butler, Binos, lifted the lids. Viscount Pompey tucked a napkin into his collar, grabbed a knife and fork, and prepared to dig into a steak. "Since that's the case, after breakfast, Mr. Jack will give Rebecca her first lesson." He spoke in a rather unenthusiastic tone. He had already decided that after today, there was no need for this man to come back. Nobility still required maintaining certain decencies, he couldn't just disrespect Lady Eulife outright. The Viscount's family breakfast was lavish and the meal luxurious, everyone ate happily. After the breakfast ended, Lady Eulife took her leave. Possibly for the peace of mind not leaving her daughter alone with a stranger, Chen Lun was arranged to teach Rebecca in the garden. Under a large parasol on the lawn, there were white carved wooden tables and chairs set up. Chen Lun sat opposite Rebecca, holding a Tresor literature anthology and taught straight from the text. His gaze moved beyond the book, observing Viscount Pompey and his wife walking in the garden. Their eyes occasionally swept over, wary of any improper behavior on his part. Read exclusive adventures at Empire. "Mr. Jack, where are you from?" Rebecca clearly wasn't listening, instead, she asked with curiosity on her face. Butler Binos, with his hands clasped behind his back, stood not far away, fulfilling his supervisory duty. "Ah, my hometown is in the distant Rock State Bronze City, Peacock City. Miss Rebecca, please focus on the lesson, otherwise, I might not be able to come here to teach you tomorrow." Chen Lun flashed a smile, causing Rebecca's eyes to widen immediately. Sunlight poured down, shining on the face of the young man with black hair, making it gleam. Her face involuntarily flushed. "No, I'll tell my father that you teach very well." Old butler Binos couldn't help but roll his eyes. Was he being ignored? He grew increasingly disdainful of Chen Lun, just reciting from the textbook verbatim. This level counts as a scholar? Any moderately literate person picked off the street could do better. Miss Rebecca, how do you view literature? Chen Lun diverted his attention away from Viscount Pompey and his wife and asked Rebecca softly. He was determined to start from this young girl. He must win her over. Chapter 55. The faith of the seven true gods spread across the entire continent, and the Tresor Empire officially supported two churches, namely the Sun Church and the Moon Church. The remaining ones such as the Constellation Sect, Red Apple Church, History and Ritual Association, Hailing Group, and Madman School, although allowed by the Empire to preach within its borders, were restricted and controlled in various aspects. As a result, the most common beliefs among the Empire's citizens were those in the Sun and the Moon. If they held reverence for the Moon Goddess, then their fervor for the Sun was unparalleled. The Sun represented the Empire. The literature of the Tresor Empire was also deeply influenced. I don't like the Sunday. Rebecca whispered. That's why I find literature so dull, it's all praises to the Sun, nothing novel. Plus, the sun often makes me so hot, I'm drenched in sweat every time I wear a dress outside. The butler, with his sharp hearing, perked up his ears and captured every word Rebecca said without missing a beat. He couldn't help but raise his brow, the wrinkles on his forehead deepening. Binos knew Miss Rebecca was usually quite lively, but he didn't expect her to be somewhat rebellious. Although not everyone in the aristocratic circle was a believer of the sun, believing in the sun was politically correct. The Sun King wouldn't care which righteous god the people below believed in, nor had others the right to interfere. But for a noble, believing in other righteous gods was not conducive to integrating into the group and could even lead to subtle ostracization. So what does Miss Rebecca like? Chen Lun put down the textbook and asked with a smiling face. I love the moon. I've told my parents many times that I want to believe in the moon goddess, but they disagree. Rebecca appeared somewhat despondent. She lifted her head to look at the dark-haired young man in front of her, her eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. Mr. Jack, could you write a poem about the moon for me? Here it comes. Chen Lun secretly chuckled. He had deliberately steered Rebecca this way, just to do something that would leave a deep impression on her. It was clear that Viscount and Lady Pompey valued their daughter greatly, and as long as she insisted on keeping him as a tutor, the likelihood of his staying was very high. Of course, Miss Rebecca. Writing poetry is the most basic skill of a literary scholar. Chen Lun gracefully touched his chest and bowed slightly. Binos secretly scoffed, almost spitting out his saliva on this shameless fellow. Although Miss Rebecca was playful, being a noble, she still had an appreciation for art. Not to mention that Viscount and Lady Pompey were right here, did he really think he could get by with just a couple of makeshift poems? This would only lower Miss Rebecca and her parents' opinion of him, turning their already slight fondness into outright disdain. Russell. Continue your journey with Empire. Chen Lun took the expensive pen from Rebecca's hand and began writing on the paper. Smelling a faint fragrance, he cheerfully finished the poem in one go without pausing. Rebecca watched the handsome man intently, almost starry-eyed. My goodness, he's really good-looking, and... She reluctantly moved her gaze from Chen Lun's face to the paper, her eyes gradually widening. He quietly casts his gentle glow, filling the valleys and forests. Once again, my soul, clears away all troubles. He gently sends his loving gaze, illuminating my dreams cold and deep, like a grandmother's doting eyes, watching over my destiny. Chen Lun capped the pen and gently set it down. This poem was adapted from a playwright from a past life, Goethe, modified slightly to fit the world view here. This poem is truly beautiful. Mr. Jack, does it have a name? Rebecca asked curiously, her cheeks flushed. To the moon. Chen Lun answered with a smile. Rebecca, clutching the paper dearly, suddenly whispered a bit embarrassingly. Mr. Jack, could you please add a line that says a poem for Rebecca at the top? Chen Lun smiled. He took the paper, picked up the pen, and wrote another line at the end. To lovely Miss Rebecca, may the moon goddess watch over her forever. Rebecca held the poem, unable to contain her joy. He called me lovely. Really? At that moment, Viscount Pompey and his wife accidentally came nearby while taking a stroll. Seeing their daughter in a daydreaming state, Lady Pompey sensed trouble. Rebecca? Rebecca? She called twice before Rebecca snapped out of it. The blonde girl immediately straightened up, fixing a stray hair under her soft white hat. Lady Pompey hurried over to the butler and whispered a few questions. Binos whispered back, causing Lady Pompey's expression to turn rather odd. "What's wrong?" Viscount Pompey asked. The lady promptly informed her husband of the unfolding events, and the Viscount was intrigued. "This lad wrote a poem, and it has fascinated Rebecca so much." "Rebecca, let's see what great poem Mr. Jack has written." "No way." Rebecca immediately refused. Viscount and Lady Pompey were helpless, so the Viscount had to say. "Without knowing Mr. Jack's abilities, we can't be comfortable letting him teach you, Rebecca." "I don't care." Viscount Pompey took a deep breath and decided to use his usual method with his daughter. "Then you will have to pay Mr. Jack's weekly salary yourself." Rebecca was stunned for a moment, then tried to stand and argue with her father, forgetting that her leg was still in a cast. "Ah!" She swayed and fell toward the ground. Chen Lun quickly stretched out a hand, gently caught her wrist, and then eased her back into the chair. The whole process was smooth, composed, and impeccably courteous, stopping just at the right moment. Viscount Pompey, his wife, and the nearby butler Binos hadn't even had a chance to exclaim before Rebecca was out of danger. "Please be careful, Miss Rebecca," Chen Lun said softly. Thank you." Rebecca stared at him, then nodded. Viscount Pompey and his wife breathed a sigh of relief and also thanked Chen Lun. While Rebecca was still regaining her senses, Lady Pompey quietly took the paper from the table. She held it in her hands, sharing the text with her husband. Beautifully penned, the poem talked about the moon. This. After reading it, Viscount Pompey felt it somewhat absurd but could not accuse Chen Lun of desecrating the moon goddess. Meanwhile, Lady Pompey nodded repeatedly, a pleased smile appearing on her face during her contemplation. "Kelly, what do you think?" the Viscount asked tentatively. "It's great, but I think it would be even better if Rebecca's name was replaced with mine." I mean, this poem is quite mediocre, not worthy of Rebecca." "I think you understand, Pompey." Lady Pompey coughed lightly and said, maintaining her usual countenance. The Viscount's face instantly darkened. Chapter 56. Viscount Pompey couldn't overcome the combined willpower of his wife and daughter and eventually decided to let Chen Lun stay. "I hereby officially employ you as Rebecca's home tutor, responsible for her literary and nature studies." Viscount Pompey wiped the corner of his mouth with a napkin and gestured with his hand. The old butler handed over an employment contract and a small purse to Chen Lun. "A weekly salary of 2 gold pounds and 80 silver ducats, is that acceptable?" Chen Lun accepted, stood up, and bowed to the Viscount. "Of course, it is my honor, your lordship." Viscount Pompey nodded and glanced at his daughter Rebecca beside him. The blonde girl was sneakily glancing at her new tutor, saw still unattended at the corners of her mouth. Suddenly, the Viscount felt a headache coming on, reminding himself to keep a close watch, lest this foreign lad entice away his precious daughter. "Thank you for your hospitality, I shall take my leave now." Chen Lun took his cape and hat from the maid's hands, turned, and gave a respectful gesture to Lady Pompey. "Farewell, beautiful madam." Lady Pompey was delighted, feeling pleased to be complimented by a handsome young man. She nodded reservedly in response. However, Rebecca next to her couldn't help but grip her fork tighter, causing it to tremble. "And of course, the lovely Miss Rebecca, farewell." Chen Lun finally bowed to Rebecca, then proceeded to put on his hat and turn to leave. Rebecca immediately beamed with joy, dropping her fork and yelling at Chen Lun. "Goodbye, Mr. Jack. Don't forget to come early tomorrow for my lesson." Chen Lun, without looking back, waved his hand to show he heard. Lady Pompey frowned and scolded Rebecca, "Such a disgrace, how could the daughter of a Viscount Pompey be so impolite? Not ladylike at all." Viscount Pompey didn't bother to intervene, feeling that his wife was probably no better. He waved his hand, indicating Binos to accompany him to the study, truly a headache. Chen Lun, having stepped out of the manor, whistled. Today, well, was a triumph for the flatterer. A few compliments, and a weekly 28 it earns. Next up, to find the inheritance Philip hid within the manor. Chen Lun looked back at the massive Pompey manor one last time and then departed. At a small manor in the southeastern part of the inner city district. This was where Chen Lun had chosen to settle down, slightly out of the way compared to the bustling city center but still not cheap in rent. He had also employed 2 maids and a coachman, and rented a carriage from a livery stable. The miscellaneous expenditures amounted to a total cost of 9 to 10 gold pounds a month. The bulk of it was for the rent of the manor and the carriage, with the manor costing 5 gold pounds per month and the carriage 1 gold pound. To ride a rented carriage in Amber City, one trip would cost between 70 and 80 copper cross. Since he often needed to go out, and Floey and Connie used it as well, he rented one for convenience. The money I earn as a teacher at the Viscount's place is just enough to make ends meet. Life is difficult. Chen Lun sighed to himself, entering his own small manor. Passing by a recently renovated warehouse, he coincidentally saw Connie talking at the warehouse door with a group of burly men. A generator rumbled near the warehouse, and a light was on above the doorway. Connie had a blueprint in hand, pointing and giving instructions, while the men occasionally nodded in agreement. Connie. Chen Lun approached and greeted her. Seeing him, Connie stopped the conversation and gave Chen Lun a smile. Mr. Jack, I've completed the task you entrusted me with. She indicated the group of men beside her. After settling Floey and Connie in the inner city district the day before, he had sent a letter to Gary, asking him to send someone to pick up Connie for a trip to the mudflats. Connie personally selected 10 craftsmen from the Iron Fist gang to bring back to the inner city district. For this, Chen Lun paid a hefty sum in gold pounds to Gary to bribe the managers at the security office, arranging emergency official identities for these 10 craftsmen. Of course, since all these craftsmen had been captured by the Iron Fist gang, Chen Lun had instructed Connie in advance to select them under the guise of hiring, choosing only those who volunteered to come. Looking at it now, it seemed quite satisfactory. Chen Lun nodded in approval. For the time being, these people were staying in the small manor, organized by Connie to start researching and forging. Chen Lun believed that with Connie, the brain, directing them, the hands and feet, their efficiency would greatly improve. You've done a good job, Connie. Chen Lun complimented her. And Floey. Miss Floey is studying inside the house. She has been researching the dishes all afternoon and is waiting for you to come back to dine together. Connie seemed somewhat pleased. She mentioned that she had recited Mrs. Caroline's cooking manual for Miss Floey. After giving a few instructions to the craftsman, she followed Chen Lun towards the detached villa. For now, the warehouse only had some simple forging tools. Chen Lun had instructed Connie to order a batch of small-scale machinery, which might take some time to arrive. His wallet shrank once again. But he believed that it wouldn't be long before he could earn back double. Have you not had dinner yet? Chen Lun had already eaten at Pompey Manor and was still quite full. Not yet. Connie shook her head and came closer, speaking in a negotiating tone. Mr. Jack, could you let me be the maid here? Miss Floey needs someone to take care of her. She suddenly paused, seemingly remembering the kidnapping incident that night and how she had held back Miss Floey, and her face flushed with embarrassment. It's still uncertain who will be taking care of whom. Connie, you are not a servant now, and I hope you will treat me as a friend. If you like, you can also act as the butler here. After all, I'm rarely here, and it indeed needs someone to manage. Chen Lun said with a smile. Connie was touched by these words and nodded vigorously. Mr. Jack, please rest assured, I will keep everything in order here. As the two talked, they entered the detached villa. This place certainly couldn't compare to the luxurious Pompey Manor, but it was far better than the conditions in the outer city district. The first floor hall was spacious, with a complete living room and kitchen. The second floor had rooms for the maids and craftsmen, while Chen Lun, Floey, and Connie lived on the third floor. The attic on the fourth floor was for storage, and that's where Chen Lun would keep his goods. When Chen Lun first rented this place, he had arranged some things and then set out, leaving the organizing and tidying to Floey and Connie. You're back. Floey was waiting at the door. Let's have our meal. I've already prepared dinner, she said, smiling and leading Chen Lun and Connie to the dining room. The table was full of food, and Chen Lun was touched by the sight, but he really couldn't eat any more. Connie was obviously hungry, and since Floey's cooking was indeed very good, she ate with somewhat less concern for appearances. Eat up, why aren't you eating? Connie's cheeks puffed up as she looked at Chen Lun with curiosity. It's delicious, Mr. Jack. I'm not very fond of fish. Floey also turned to stare at him. Whether it was an illusion or not, Chen Lun felt that mixed with her anticipation was a sense of threat. Eat. I really love fish. You have to know I grew up by the sea, fishing every day, this is the taste of home. Chen Lun slapped his chest, his palm hitting the ghost face badge. Come on, brother. Make me hungry. He ate with tears in his eyes, the fish head dangling from his mouth, swaying as he chewed. Seeing Floey's satisfied expression, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. But then he saw her get up and bring over several new dishes from the kitchen. It was still the fish he hated the most. Chapter 57. Chen Lun left the small manor without eating breakfast. Because he had not digested last night's food yet. The feeling of going to work in a horse carriage isn't bad. Chen Lun remarked in the carriage. The roads in the inner city district were very smooth, without bumps, much better than his previous experiences in a carriage. Soon, the carriage arrived at the entrance of Pompey Manor. Chen Lun instructed the coachman to come back in the evening to wait for him here. The coachman nodded, bowed, and then drove the carriage away. At the entrance, a maid had been waiting for a while, and upon seeing Chen Lun alight from the carriage, she opened the great gate just enough for him to enter. The great gate was too heavy, and fully opening it was a bit difficult for the maid. "Mr. Jack, Viscount Pompey is having breakfast. He said if you arrived early, you could join him." Binos said to Chen Lun as they reached the villa entrance. "No need, I already ate before I came. Please thank His Excellency the Viscount for his kindness, Butler Binos." Chen Lun nodded, politely replying. "Then please wait in the living room for a moment, Miss Rebecca's nature class will start at 10 o'clock. Binos led Chen Lun to sit on the living room sofa, greeted him, and then left. Watching the old butler disappear around the corner of the living room, Chen Lun idly surveyed his surroundings. Many framed paintings hung on the walls, mostly oil paintings. It was unclear whether it was the preference of the era or just Viscount Pompey's personal taste. Just past 9 o'clock, Chen Lun heard the rapid sound of wheels rolling. Rebecca approached him by herself, pushing her wheelchair. "Huff! Good morning, Mr. Jack." She seemed very excited, and her attire and makeup appeared deliberately styled, looking even prettier than the day before. "Good morning, Miss Rebecca." Chen Lun stood up, removing his hat in preparation to bow. But he saw Rebecca quickly remove her white lace gloves and swiftly extend her hand towards him. He was slightly startled, then saw Rebecca looking at him with flushed face, expectantly. "You look very beautiful today, but this outfit might not be suitable for my nature class." Chen Lun took Rebecca's hand and kissed it on the back. Rebecca did not hear his words. "He kissed me. Did he smell the perfume I deliberately sprayed on my hand today? Is it too pungent?" "Ahem, ahem." Lady Pompey coughed twice and walked over quickly. "Good morning, Lady Pompey." "Good morning, Mr. Jack." After amiably greeting each other, Lady Pompey said to Chen Lun. "Hearing of your arrival, Rebecca left breakfast unfinished and pushed herself here with her wheelchair." Saying this, she squinted and glared at Rebecca. Rebecca, unfazed, stared back. "Ah, I'm truly sorry for that, it seems Miss Rebecca is very eager to learn." Chen Lun feigned apology, showing an embarrassed expression. "In that case, may we begin today's lesson?" "Yes, yes." Rebecca nodded, ignoring her mother's watchful presence, and pushed herself towards the door. Fearing she may stumble on the doorstep, Butler Binos hurriedly followed her. 10 minutes later, Chen Lun sat under a sun umbrella, sharing his views on nature with Rebecca. Honestly, he actually felt quite passionate about this topic. Whether it was his past experiences exploring maps alone or his understanding after becoming a beast tamer. "Animals are an indispensable part of nature, look at this snake," he said, pointing at a venomous snake on the table and spoke eloquently. Rebecca, already frightened, paled and huddled up in her chair, not daring to move. The green scales shone under the sunlight, its small body coiled up, lifting its little head and staring at her. It's staring at me," Rebecca said with a tremble in her voice. "Oh no, this is just a fake snake, as I said, merely a prop." Chen Lun picked up the venomous snake and placed it in his palm. "See, it won't bite. Don't be scared, Miss Rebecca, come, feel it." "Ah!" Chen Lun grabbed Rebecca's hand and gently placed it on the snake. Cold, with a tangible texture. Rebecca slowly opened her eyes and her face gradually revealed a look of surprise. "It's really fake, but it looks so realistic, it's amazing." In the distance, Viscount Pompey, not quite at ease, glanced at his wife. "That's really a fake snake." "Yes, Binos has already checked," Lady Pompey explained. "Besides, Mr. Jack is a scholar, not a madman, no one would carry a venomous snake in their pocket," she said, then shifted her attention back to Chen Lun. This dark-haired young man had a certain charm while lecturing, which was no wonder why his daughter Rebecca liked him. Chen Lun finished discussing each part of the snake in detail, along with its habits and origins. Rebecca's eyes shone with realization and admiration. She had never attended a class so seriously, and although she didn't like such knowledge originally, once Chen Lun lectured, she firmly memorized it. What she didn't see, however, was that when Chen Lun unnoticeably stuffed the fake snake into his pocket, it accidentally fell onto the lawn. Like a drop of green water, it fell into the green ocean and disappeared without a trace. This scene also went unnoticed by the Binos and Viscount Pompey couple. "Let it go check out the backyard first," Chen Lun thought. "Hey! Be careful!" Suddenly, everyone heard a loud shout. Chen Lun looked up to see a brown stallion bursting out from the other end of the garden. It galloped vigorously, dashing recklessly, followed by a male servant desperately chasing after it. "Ah!" Rebecca screamed. The Pompey Viscount couple and the Binos butler were all startled. They saw the horse charging straight towards the parasol where Rebecca was. If it hit her, Rebecca would definitely be in mortal danger. "Stop it quickly!" Viscount Pompey roared. But it was already too late. In an instant, amid a loud crash, the horse knocked over the tables and chairs, toppled the parasol, and then rushed towards Rebecca. Bang! A dull thud followed by complete silence ensued. "Rebecca!" The Pompeys rushed over immediately. With the toppled parasol blocking their view and path, they had to go around to the back. Their hearts pounded, fearing to see their daughter in a gruesome state. But what they saw was Mr. Jack supporting Rebecca on the side, with the horse lying on the ground, bleeding from its mouth. "Oh, thank heavens, Rebecca, you're okay." Lady Pompey rushed forward anxiously, embracing Rebecca. "Thank the sun for its protection." "No, Mom, you should thank Mr. Jack. He saved me," Rebecca said surprisingly calmly to Lady Pompey. Her words were also overheard by Viscount Pompey and the Binos butler. Everyone stared at Chen Lun in surprise. A frail young man subdued a runaway stallion? What a joke! They merely thought that Chen Lun had pulled Rebecca away from the collision at a critical moment, and the horse happened to die on the spot. Only then did their speculation seem to make sense. This horse was fed something strange, which caused it to go mad, and ultimately its heart burst and it died, Chen Lun explained after examining the horse's corpse. This made them even more certain of their assumption. Only Rebecca knew that it truly was Mr. Jack who subdued the mad horse and saved her. At that critical moment, she had widened her eyes in fear and saw Mr. Jack step forward, standing in front of her. With just the extension of one hand, he struck the mad horse down, as if swatting a fly. Upon waking up, she could hardly believe it. Was he an angel? No. He was her knight. Chen Lun quietly made a shushing gesture towards Rebecca, who blinked back in understanding. "Don't worry, Mr. Jack. This will be our secret." "What was up with that horse?" Viscount Pompey asked sternly, facing the belatedly arriving male servant. "Viscount, I'm not quite sure," the servant swallowed nervously. In fact, it had run amok before, but the specific reason is unknown. "When did this happen?" The servant glanced at Rebecca. "That time when Miss Rebecca secretly rode it to school." Viscount Pompey frowned. So, was that the reason Rebecca injured her leg last time because of this insane horse? He couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Luckily, last time Rebecca only injured her leg. Viscount Pompey suddenly realized how inappropriate it seemed to think this way, but he didn't dwell on it further. Then he sternly asked. "Where did this horse come from?" It was you, Viscount, who brought it from Baron Barney's place." Viscount Pompey stiffened. He remembered now, this horse was indeed one he had obtained from his friend, Barney. Damn! Chapter 58. Chen Lun arrived on time in the morning to clock in for work and discovered a unique carriage at the entrance of the manor. After entering the villa, he saw a slightly portly middle-aged man sitting on the sofa, chatting and laughing with Viscount Pompey. "Come, Barney, let me introduce you." Viscount Pompey enthusiastically introduced Chen Lun to his good friend. "This is Mr. Jack, the tutor I found for Rebecca," said the Viscount. "Hello, Mr. Barney." Chen Lun extended his hand in a friendly manner. Baron Barney sized him up with a few glances and shook his hand with a smile. "So young, I didn't expect Mr. Jack to be a scholar at such a young age." He immediately turned his head and asked Viscount Pompey with a look of curiosity. I remember you had Mrs. Eula love, didn't you? Viscount Pompey smiled awkwardly and explained briefly, brushing over the matter lightly. The Viscount then told Chen Lun that Rebecca had been frightened the day before and was still resting. He suggested Chen Lun to look around the villa on his own and feel free to wander around the manor. After speaking, he and Baron Barney settled back onto the sofa. Chen Lun picked up on the implicit message from Viscount Pompey. He didn't want his conversation with Baron Barney to be disturbed. It's about the horse yesterday. He thought to himself. Viscount Pompey probably wanted to clear up the matter with Baron Barney, but considering the old friend's face, he wouldn't let outsiders be present. Chen Lun found Butler Binos, who was directing the maids to clean in another hall. Butler Binos. He walked over and greeted him. Mr. Jack, what can I assist you with? The old butler saw him, stood up straight, and said with a smile. Through Chen Lun's performance over the past 2 days, Binos had gained a better impression of the young man. It was evident that Viscount and Viscountess Pompey were not as repulsed by him as they were at the beginning. As the manor's butler and someone who had served under 2 generations of Viscount Pompeys, the old man would naturally align more with the master's opinions and, as a result, show a slightly better attitude towards Chen Lun. His lordship indicated that I could tour the villa, and I'd like to visit the study, if that's all right. Chen Lun said politely. Binos had an expression of realization. Oh, of course, Lord Viscount wouldn't turn away a scholar who loves knowledge. Especially since he is Miss Rebecca's tutor. The old butler gestured towards the upstairs with his hand. Come, Mr. Jack, please follow me this way. Chen Lun followed Butler Binos upstairs. The spiral wooden staircase was spacious and bright, as the maids scrubbed it clean every day. On one side of the second floor, there was an exhibition hall filled with artworks. Without lingering, the old butler led Chen Lun through and entered the other side of the exhibition hall. This is it, Mr. Jack. If there's anything else you need, you can find me. After saying this, he bowed slightly and left. Chen Lun looked around at the books that filled the room, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Well, with so many books, there's got to be one with supernatural knowledge, right? He thought to himself and got started right away. The library was located on the side of the art exhibition hall but was slightly larger than the exhibition space. A chandelier hung from the ceiling with 8 light bulbs, illuminating the entire library. The place was airy and the bookcases lining the 4 walls reached the ceiling, neatly filled with various large volumes. 2 wooden ladders were placed on the side for easy access to the books. In the middle of the library was a large desk and several chairs for sitting down to read and transcribe. For Chen Lun, this was very nice. Time flew by swiftly. He had not yet finished flipping through the books on one wall when he picked up a thin, yellow-covered book and began to read. You have discovered a mystic book of the nature faction. On the instinct of survival, progress 5%. Through careful reading, you've gained 25 experience points. You have discovered complete knowledge of a hidden supernatural pathway. Nature faction sequence 9, Wildman. Chen Lun's face lit up with joy. There is one. And it's another hidden pathway. Could I be of a lucky lineage? It must be. He took the book in his hands and hurried down the wooden stairs. He sat down at the desk, read intently, not wasting any time. Another hour passed. On the instinct of survival, progress 15%. Through careful reading, you've gained 50 experience points. Through careful reading, you have gained some understanding and have comprehended the skill survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest LV1, passive. Skill description, your years as a beast tamer have given you a deeper understanding of nature. In the animal kingdom, it's survival of the fittest, a natural law of selection. With your ability to draw parallels, you can enhance your own attributes by observing the ways in which animals survive and thrive. This is limited to strength, agility, endurance, charm, and insight, and allows for a 1-point increase to the cap of each, not to be granted again. A passive skill that enhances one's own attributes. Chen Lun was somewhat surprised. Such skills are quite rare, and though the attributes they enhance are limited, the benefits are permanent. After all, one must be strong oneself, panel attributes are the foundation of strength. He was very satisfied with the skill. Chen Lun allocated 4 skill points to it, pumping them in instantly to max it out. Survival of the fittest of max, passive. Skill description, limited to strength, agility, endurance, charm, and insight, with each cap increased by 5 points, not to be granted again. 5 attributes, each can be raised by 5 points, adding up to 25 points. This was a considerable number. It was almost like gaining the profits of leveling up 10 levels out of thin air. And it includes 2 special attributes, charm and insight, which cannot be increased with attribute points and are extremely valuable. I've hit the jackpot. Thankfully, the Destiny faction pathway I'm on overlaps with this Nature faction pathway. Chen Lun mused to himself. Theoretically, each sequence could only acquire skills related to its own path through the corresponding supernatural knowledge. But there were exceptions, such as the situation Chen Lun was in now. In his past life, he had vaguely guessed from these phenomena that perhaps each sequence had unknown connections and secrets to one another. Knock, knock. The soft sound of 2 knocks at the door. Chen Lun turned to look, and the old butler Binos was standing at the door, making an apologetic gesture. I apologize for interrupting your reading, Mr. Jack. The Viscount invites you to join him for lunch at the dining room. In addition, the Viscount's family and Baron Barney will be going out this afternoon to visit the Verdant Scream Zoo. The Viscount has asked me to inquire if you would like to accompany them. Chen Lun stood up and stuffed the yellow-covered book he had been holding into a corner of the bookshelf. As his hand left the spine, he couldn't help but stroke it a few times, reluctant to part with it. This book is amazing, I'll grace it with my presence again next time. He then turned to the door and displayed a polite smile. Of course, I would be delighted to accompany them, it would be my honor. Chapter 59. Baron Barney sipped fine wine, laughing and chatting with Viscount Pompey and his wife. It was evident that the issue with the horse had come to a conclusion. Chen Lun ate in silence, listening to their conversations about amusing incidents within the noble circle, and the latest decisions from the parliament. Little Rebecca, that horse caused you to fall and hurt your leg, and it almost hit you afterwards. Uncle Barney feels very guilty, so let me apologize to you here. Baron Barney raised his goblet, smiling and nodding to Rebecca who sat across the table. Rebecca quickly put down her knife and fork, also lifting her own wine glass. It's okay, Uncle Barney. It wasn't your fault, I was the one who was being playful. After both had drunk the red wine, Viscount Pompey began talking about the afternoon itinerary. Barney, I heard that the main investor behind the Tweedy Zoo is Earl Bradley. Oh, it seems there's nothing that can escape your notice, Pompey. Yes, Earl Bradley has invested a considerable sum there. Baron Barney, having finished his meal, took the napkin a maid handed him to wipe his mouth and spoke with enthusiasm. The place is doing well at the moment, so many people visit every day. With so many tickets sold, the return is a handsome amount of gold pounds. It's truly enviable. They've just received 2 new elephants, we could go see them. Rebecca, upon hearing this, showed much interest and immediately started coaxing Mrs. Pompey. Overwhelmed by her pestering, Mrs. Pompey agreed as if placating a child. After all, the plan was to visit the zoo in the afternoon, and spending extra time to see the elephants was not an issue. Mr. Jack, you'll come too, won't you? Rebecca turned to Chen Lun and asked, her eyes brimming with anticipation. Of course, Miss Rebecca. That would be wonderful. Rebecca seemed very happy and then, remembering to be more ladylike, she lowered her voice and added. You'll have to teach me about the animals, just like a lesson. No problem, consider it an outdoor practical class. Chen Lun replied with a smile. After the luncheon, Butler Binos had the carriage prepared in advance, with Mrs. Pompey and Rebecca in one, and the 3 gentlemen in another. This arrangement made Rebecca pout with dissatisfaction. The carriage left the manor's great gate and travelled down the road. Baron Barney sat across from Chen Lun, looking at the young man and laughing. Mr. Jack, you are quite accomplished for your age, having diagnosed the precise cause of death of my horse with just a simple examination truly worthy of a scholar in this field. However, Viscount Pompey sitting beside him, revealed a puzzled expression and cast an inquiring look at Chen Lun. Does the study of nature also include knowledge of veterinary medicine? The situation was urgent yesterday, but in hindsight, it does seem a bit presumptuous. Mr. Jack. Baron Barney's affection towards you has decreased, he is now in a hostile state. Chen Lun saw the notification and also noticed Viscount Pompey's suspicion. There's something off about Baron Barney. He thought anxiously, though he kept his expression unchanged. He wondered what Barney and Viscount Pompey had discussed that had allowed the horse incident to blow over. But Chen Lun knew that the horse had consumed food containing superhuman strength, which had caused it to become frenzied. Based on Rebecca's encounter, it was very likely that the attack was specifically targeted at Viscount Pompey's family. However, the superhuman powers that could make a horse act to this extent weren't limited to a single sequence, and Chen Lun could not yet speculate which it might be. Viscount, I purposely learned about veterinary science in the past for my studies. Chen Lun lied with a straight face. Viscount Pompey nodded, not pursuing the topic any further. Baron Barney, on the other hand, gave him a deep, probing look. After a while, the carriage came to a stop. The group alighted, and not far away stood a grand archway with guardrails extending on both sides. A large sign hung above the gate: Tweedy Zoo. Streams of people came and went as Butler Binos tied the carriage to the post outside and returned after paying for the entrance tickets. He took responsibility for pushing Rebecca's wheelchair, while Mrs. Pompey opened a floral umbrella to shield her daughter from the sun. The group slowly entered the zoo. Mr. Jack, I heard you're from out of town? This trip with us is also a way to show you around the city. Baron Barney laughed heartily. Chen Lun nodded politely to him and then said in a soft voice. Thank you, Baron, but I believe the most convenient way to understand a city is to find out how its people work, love, and die. I've stayed in the outer city district for a while and I already understand it quite well. Baron Barney's smile stiffened, and he said no more. Mr. Jack, so you've actually stayed in the outer city district? Is it fun? I've never been there. I want to go see it too, but my parents don't allow it. Rebecca looked at Chen Lun with curiosity. It's not fun there, Miss Rebecca. Chen Lun said evenly, glancing at Mrs. Pompey beside her. The life you have now is one those from the outer city district dream of, yet cannot attain. Is what Mr. Jack saying true, Mom? Rebecca turned her head to Mrs. Pompey for confirmation. Mrs. Pompey nodded. Yes, Rebecca, there are many bad people in the outer city district, they do evil things all day long just to move to the inner city district. Do you remember the son of Congressman Lawson? That young man was killed by someone from the outer city district. Rebecca was successfully frightened by her mother's words and covered her mouth. Immediately, she looked at Chen Lun, her gaze once again filled with familiar admiration. Mr. Jack is so amazing. The bad people of the outer city district can't do anything to him. Kelly, don't talk about these things with Rebecca. Viscount Pompey and Baron Barney, walking ahead, turned back and instructed his wife. Mrs. Pompey patted Rebecca on the shoulder and teasingly said. Our dear Viscount is very concerned about you, Rebecca. The group saw many animals along the way. To Chen Lun, these were not anything exotic. But here, only residents of the inner city district have the financial resources and time to visit often. The cost of a ticket isn't much, but to the poor, it's half a month's expenses. Mr. Jack, are those two gorillas kissing? Are they a couple? Rebecca pointed at a large cage, where two black gorillas were embracing, and asked curiously. No. Chen Lun glanced over and explained to Rebecca. They're both males, they just fought over mating and are now comforting each other. Kissing for them has a reconciling meaning, much like how we shake hands. Ah! Rebecca was somewhat surprised. The others also heard Chen Lun's explanation and were surprised by it. But remembering Chen Lun's identity, they silently chose to believe this explanation. Such is the charm of authority. You have witnessed the courtship process of the gorillas. Survival of the fittest of max, passive, is activated. Strength +1, agility +1, charm +1. Chen Lun was slightly taken aback, not expecting the skill activation criteria to be so simple. He looked around, suddenly filled with anticipation. Chapter 60. Whatever they visited, he observed. Whenever something interesting came up, Rebecca would ask him like a curious child, and Chen Lun would always explain on the spot. The Viscount Pompey couple felt fortunate that this knowledgeable family tutor could join them, adding more significance to this trip. For the most part, the visit didn't trigger the survival of the fittest passive skill. It was only when animals were seen eating or courting that Chen Lun actually received the corresponding attribute points. Even so, by the end of the round, the attributes he could collect were fairly substantial. Just then, Chen Lun suddenly noticed Baron Barney, who was walking ahead, slightly moving his hand behind his back. The motion was natural and didn't attract attention. But Chen Lun squinted his eyes. He slightly tilted his head and scanned the surrounding crowd. A young man selling ice cream from a small cart seemed to lower his cap brim because of the glaring sun. In a large iron cage nearby, a staff member was feeding a lazy tiger. Two women were distributing circus flyers, vigorously promoting the evening's show. Everything seemed normal. "Oh, Pompey, excuse me for a moment, I drank too much at lunch," Baron Barney said to Viscount Pompey. The Viscount nodded in understanding and then asked everyone to wait under the shade of trees for Baron Barney's return. Chen Lun frowned as he watched Baron Barney's departing figure. At that moment, a disturbance arose from the crowds around, followed by tourists up ahead turning around and running frantically. "Ah!" they screamed, panicked, as if they had seen something terrifying. Seeing this, Viscount Pompey's family also grew nervous. "What happened?" "Binos?" Viscount Pompey asked, frowning. The old butler Binos stared at the crowd for a few seconds and shook his head. "There are too many people, I can't see clearly." "Your Excellency, should we leave now? It might become dangerous here." Viscount Pompey glanced in the direction Baron Barney had left, then looked at his wife and daughter. "Let's not panic everyone, let's wait a little longer, Barney hasn't come back yet, and I'm worried he doesn't know the situation." Boom! A trumpeting sound, accompanied by the trembling of the ground. Behind the crowd, two massive beast shadows appeared, they were two frenzied elephants. They charged toward the crowd, causing injuries to many bystanders in their path. "Your Excellency the Viscount, let's hurry up and go." Binos urged anxiously. "Damn it! How could this happen? Let's go." Viscount Pompey bit his lip, directing everyone to avoid the crowd and leave along the side under the shade of the trees. Clang! Suddenly, an ice cream cart came crashing sideways, blocking the path of Viscount Pompey and his group. The crowd was startled, and Lady Pompey let out a brief scream. The young man wearing the cap took off running, disappearing into the crowd. All around was chaos and noise. Seeing the path blocked, Rebecca clutched the corner of Chen Lun's clothing in fear. "Don't be afraid, Miss Rebecca," Chen Lun said softly. Rebecca nodded a bit reassured. Roar! A loud roar and a conspicuous yellow-brown fierce beast broke out of its cage. "Don't panic, everyone! This way!" The two women distributing flyers yelled loudly. Panic spread as they pushed through the crowd, intentionally squeezing refugees to one side. Seemingly helping to evacuate, they actually split the crowd, completely blocking the escape route for Pompey's family. The tiger that had escaped its cage, drooling, charged violently toward the group with the Viscount. "Watch out! Barney!" Viscount Pompey's heart skipped a beat, instinctively calling out to the old butler. Barney, old and steady, gradually calmed down after the initial panic. He instantly understood the Viscount's intent, spun Rebecca's wheelchair around, taking the lead to clear the way. However, the old butler, due his age, couldn't push through the crowded throng of people. As the tiger lunged, Barney gritted his teeth and stood in front of Viscount Pompey to protect him. At that critical moment, everyone heard Mr. Jack's voice from behind. "Little cat! Come here!" Whiz! A sharp whistle. The tiger roared and bypassed the old man trying to risk his life, attacking the dark-haired young man instead. Chen Lun lowered his finger from his lips, dodged to the side, and evaded the tiger's pounce. In the blur of their crossing paths, he raised his hand, fingers coming together like a beak plunging into water, and gently pecked at the tiger's flank, quickly withdrawing his hand. The sequence of movements was as quick as lightning, unnoticed by the onlookers. The tiger, failing in its attempt to bite, rolled on the ground, roaring in pain, but unable to rise. On Chen Lun's thigh, the pitch-black gloss on his fingertips slowly faded, returning to normal. Animal Mimicry of Max. Stork Peck. Skill description: you have learned the characteristics of a shoebill stork, able to momentarily harden your fingers and deliver explosive damage. This was a new trait Chen Lun had acquired from a rare shoebill stork he encountered during the tour, using his animal mimicry ability. Simultaneously, he also obtained another ability characteristic stork stomach, which gave Chen Lun powerful digestive capabilities. At the same time, Chen Lun pruned away such trash traits as ant-eating and tree climbing, allowing his 10 characteristics to excel in their respective areas, adopting a well-rounded development route to adapt to combat in various situations. This tiger, just like the crazed horse yesterday. Chen Lun took a quick glance at it and thought to himself. The tiger, having lost its sanity, could not be communicated with, so Chen Lun had no choice but to physically subdue it. "Mr. Jack!" Rebecca exclaimed in alarm. Viscount and Lady Pompey and Barney were all shocked, turning their heads to stare at Chen Lun. They hadn't expected the frail-looking tutor to willingly draw the fierce tiger's attention to protect them. "Are you hurt, Mr. Jack?" Rebecca wheeled herself over, asking with concern. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Chen Lun shook his head. "It didn't catch me, just fell over itself." Seeing the tiger Chen Lun pointed at, writhing on the ground in agony, everyone felt a lingering fear. When ferocious animals are caged, they are merely objects of human entertainment. Once they break free, they transform into fierce beasts of nature, dragging humanity back to the primal fight for survival, where the strong live and the weak perish. "Now is not the time for chit-chat, let's get out of here," Chen Lun warned. Viscount Pompey nodded and directed Barney to lead everyone to push through the crowd and escape into the distance. Chen Lun turned around, eyeing two rampaging elephants, pondering briefly. "Your Excellency the Viscount, you go ahead and leave, I'll go back and look for Baron Barney." Viscount Pompey, concerned for his old friend, nodded as well. "Take care, Lord Jack. We'll wait for you outside." Show respect to the man who saved his family's life, Viscount Pompey used an honorific. Chen Lun turned and walked back, under Rebecca's worried gaze. He had just received a mission. Trigger D-Class Mission, Beast Tamer's Debut. Mission Description: A zoo riot has erupted at Green Tree Zoo, it's time for you to perform. Tame the wild animals and shine on your own stage. Mission Rewards: 800 experience points, 70 silver ducats, and 1 low sequence mysterious substance of the Destiny faction.